Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, spirits of all ages, welcome to the BlunderSpeaker Show. Yes, indeed. Welcome back to the BlunderSpeaker Show, everyone. Absolute pleasure to have you here. My name, as always, is Tepid Goose, and this is the show where we... Oh, I've already clicked on the wrong thing. What a start. I didn't have my right screen up on the page. You know me, I love to blunder through the intro. We are, of course, the BlunderSpeaker Show. This is a show where we talk about Spirit Island. We play Spirit Island. We review, we analyse, we do the whole lot about Spirit Island. And sometimes we even give things away related to Spirit Island. That's going to be coming up now momentarily. Everything I do is done in one take for anybody who is joining us new. And I imagine there probably are quite a few this time around. This is what happens. I do terrible intros, I blunder my way through things, and we have a laugh about it, and we keep moving because, as I say, everything gets done in one take here. There's no time for reruns, there's no time for practice runs, there's no time for editing. None of that sort of stuff makes sense in my life because I am far too busy. I'm here and we're doing it in one take, and we're doing it sort of live, kind of live, and we're going to have some fun with it. As I say, Tepagoose, that's my name. And what are we today? Today we are Tuesday, the 20th of May. It is now currently 38 minutes past 9 p.m. local time. And again, for anybody who's joining the show new, I am based I was about to say Dublin, Ireland. I'm not Dublin, Ireland. I spent most of my life in Dublin, but I actually live outside Dublin now. I live in a place called Kildare, which is just over the way from Dublin. But I do live in Ireland. And if you know anything about Irish accents and Irish people, we tend to speak a little bit fast. So I hope that everybody is going to be along for the ride and enjoy what you're going to hear tonight. Of course, I do need to mention the giveaway, and we are here to do a big giveaway as part of the show tonight. So hopefully you'll have seen that we've had a competition running for you can see it over my shoulder here, the old Oops All Spirits from Nolan Nasser. I have the other one here again in the box ready to be sent out to a winner of the gift. So absolutely can't wait. Nolan, of course, has donated one of these to the channel. I'm sure that's why a lot of you are here. So new people to the channel, if you have subscribed, please do consider staying subscribed. Of course, I do understand that some people will just be here for the giveaway, and that's quite okay. I will not take any offense if you drop out after the fact, but I would say do consider staying, having a listen to the episode, and you just never know. You may like what you see, and you may like to stay around and stick around for future episodes. But that's kind of all of that. In terms of what we're actually going to do as part of the episode, I've kind of got a little bit of a template for these now as we're getting towards the end of the Adversary Series. So of course we are here. I can't remember if I've mentioned it already. We're here to talk about the Kingdom of England. That is, of course, the episode. That's what we're here to talk about. We're going to do the deep dive. We're going to do the analysis. We'll start out with the adversary panel. We'll sort of look at who they are, what they do. And we've got a whole big section there around community inputs, of course. And a lot of people, again, have been involved. So we'll dig into all of that. And then we'll sort of round that out then after the fact with I'll go through my own sort of analysis around how they're going to beat us. So again, I'm kind of happy with the way I've landed on the format of this here. So we'll kind of go through about how they beat us, sort of the things that they do, and then we'll go after the fact, and we will look at how we beat them. So of course, I do have some tips and tricks. I do have sort of guidelines around strategies and tactics on how you can go about beating England. So if you play against England, and if you hate them, or if you love them, or if you find them difficult, or even if you don't, we've got some tips and tricks here, and we are really going to dig into major powers as part of this episode, which I'm really, really excited about. If you've seen me on the channel, I love a major power, and I really do strongly believe in them. And of course, as we're going to hear from plenty of people and myself, major powers into England are quite a big deal. So we've got a bit of a section later on around kind of how to play with majors, how to go about sort of bringing them into your game, and I do hear quite a lot of that in the community from a lot of people around. I don't really know how to play with majors, when to draft them, how to kind of get better with them. So we've got a whole section around that I'm I'm really, really excited about. Will then sort of round out the end of the episode, as I always do, with a bit of a breakdown on the playthrough, which I did against England, which launched last week, and hopefully you've had a chance to have a look at that. If you haven't, I'm going to stop right now because I often forget to do this, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to float that thing up in the corner there, which if you can, go and click that right now. If that's your kind of thing and you like watching playthrough videos, please do go and watch that video before you watch this one. Do remember to come back to this one, but the playthrough it's fantastic. If I'd say so myself, it was one of the most amount of fun I've ever had in any games of Spirit Island. Super unique, lots of really interesting things happening there. So I do strongly suggest you go and watch that one before I spoil some of the things that I'm going to probably talk about in and around the episode today. So I would recommend going watching that one first. But otherwise, we'll kind of talk through a little bit of that around at the end of the episode, and then of course we'll close out the episode as usual with kind of what's coming next. But as I did mention, of course, in throughout there, I'm not going to do it right away in terms of the giveaway. I'll do it later on, but we are going to do the giveaway, and I'm really, really excited about doing all that. So please do hold onto your seats and follow me along for the ride. Now, what else do I have? I usually kind of go through and sort of flitter around a bit about what's going on in the room and kind of what's been happening. I'm happy to announce that I feel I have a better handle on the audio. So I did mention this the last one or two times here that I figured some stuff out with the audio filters and all of that. And it's usually me coming and telling you about the problems I've been having. But thankfully today, I'm coming and tell you about it's been actually quite smooth sailing as far as sound checks and everything go before the fact. So the window is open. It's been thunderstorms outside today. So thankfully they have eased off about 2 hours ago, because it was crazy thunder and really loud rain and all sort of stuff was happening really recently outside that window. But it's gone away for now. So hopefully that won't cause us too many issues in that side of things. The fan is still blaring, and actually, funny enough, if you noticed, those of you with a keen ear, or probably not even needing a keen ear, really, would maybe have noticed that on my on the giveaway video that I did, and I kind of did a little behind the kind of camera view in the room here, while I was showing the print. There's sort of three portions of the video. So there's me sort of at the start here, like this. Then obviously it jumps to me doing the kind of handheld through my phone stuff, and then I come back here then after the fact. But that middle portion where it's me with my phone, if you listen, you can actually hear the laptop fan going crazy in the background. And it's not really until it goes back to the third portion where the cutover happens, and it's like all of the background noise goes and disappears, because of course all my filters and everything are done at the source as part of this mic while I'm doing the recording. So I cut all of that out without having to get it out in post-production. But as a result, of course, my phone picked up all that background sound. So if you want and you want to have a laugh, you can go back and you can get an idea about the difference between the room with and without those kind of filters cutting all that background stuff out. So that's, again, touch wood, fingers crossed, all that kind of sort of stuff around. Hopefully it's getting there, and I'm getting a handle on it, and I really do feel better about things going forward. So thank God for that. So what else? I do of course have a beer. I always have a beer, and this beer is a little bit of a joke almost today. So if you watch the England playthrough, I do have a bit of Irish heritage thrown in. I usually like to theme my my beers for my episodes that you probably have known if you've seen before. Now, what I have today, because it's England, and because I wanted to theme my beers, and I didn't want to go Ireland again because I did that joke already, so I have gone for an English beer here. Let's have a look at what we have for today, and it is a beer, as you can see there, called Madrid Excepcional, El Alma de Madrid. You can see it there, Cerveza Excepcional. So yeah, that's my terrible attempt at a Spanish accent there. But yes, this is indeed an English beer, believe it or not. Madrid Excepcional. It's kind of almost a running joke or a meme in the beer world. This company is made by Coors, I believe. Believe it or not, Coors, English company. I think Coors are English, or at least they're Molson Coors Brewing Company UK. It's made by an English company. It's brewed in the UK. This beer has never touched foot on Spanish soil. It is a purely marketing sort of strategy only to try and get in with the certain crowds. With that kind of, obviously, it's got the whole Spanish vibe. It's very much branded like something like Estrella Damm or something like that. With the reds and sort of the imagery and everything like that, but it's an English beer, and I hate English beer for the most part. I certainly hate English lager. Carling, I believe, are one of the sort of subsidiaries of Coors. Carling is a terrible beer as well. So something tells me I am going to hate this beer, and I've been avoiding it for years for that very reason. But it's one of them things where at some point I wanted to taste it just because it's a bit of a meme at this point. So I said, look, if ever there's a chance, or if ever there's an opportunity to waste my money on a terrible Spanish style, English style lager, why not do it for this evening? So this is what I do. This is the dedication I have for this channel. I'm willing to drink Madre Excepcional for a joke on this channel, and that is what this means to me. Let's have a look. I'm already not in love with the look of the head. Very sooty, dishwatery, sooty kind of look to that there. Let's have a little look through the side. Fairly standard lager sort of a vibe to that. Nothing particularly interesting looking in the glass. Smells a little sweet. Let's have a little taste. I'd love to be surprised here, but I just don't believe that I am. It's dreadful. Oh, God. Oh, that's dreadful. Now, I will say I'm thirsty. I'm very thirsty, actually. I haven't really been drinking water. I've been running around getting everything organised for the for the video there this evening. So I've been a bit busy, and I am thirsty. So I'm going to go back and drink more of it. But that is not because I think it's a good beer. Let me tell you that. But I'll have a big old gulp, because I am a little bit parched. Beer, believe it or not, does not actually hydrate you. For those believers out there, beer will not hydrate you. It will dehydrate you. So if you're thirsty, don't drink beer. That's the general gist of things. I do have water over there. And actually, I do have to make another little small announcement. I have given up sparkling water. So I'm going to go and grab myself a bit of still water here. For those new to the channel, sparkling water is my jam. I absolutely love it. It's one of them Marmite type things, and we'll come back to the Marmite joke very, very soon as far as England are concerned. But I love sparkling water, but it is not doing me any favours as far as my digestion is concerned. That's probably enough detail for that for now. But I do believe I should probably be giving that up and drinking sparkling water, as well as, a reasonably frequent beer, as you probably noticed by now on the channel. Not great for digestion purposes. So I'm giving up sparkling water because I drank about 3 litres of it per day, and I need to see what the impact is going to be on my general health. But anyway, that was far too personal. Absolute nonsense. We're 30, what are we now? Almost 14 minutes in, and I haven't even looked at this beard panel yet. If you're still with me, this is the kind of gist. This is what we do on this show. You're not here for a quick 15, 20 minutes and we'll be done. We're going to chat. We're going to get into it. We're going to get personal. It's going to get emotional. And it's going to be all sorts of good news. So let us start with the adversary panel. That's where we're going to start. That's where I always start here. And I will, of course, bring that up on the screen for those of you lucky enough to be watching by video. But if you are not and you are listening through the audio medium only, we will, of course, talk through everything. And you should not have too much missed out for that reason. Now, Kingdom of England. So even before we get into the adversary panel, I suppose let me talk about my own opinions very briefly here. I love this adversary. I absolutely love it. It's my favorite of the 8. I love playing against it. It is a grueling slog. It is just big slobber knocker, windmill slamming big bombs versus them just doing double bills and triple bills and quadruple bills, and there's buildings everywhere, there's plastic everywhere, and there's nukes going off, and there's volcanoes going off, and there's all sorts of things. I just find that so much fun. Is it refined? Is it cultured? No, not really. And we will certainly hear from many people about why England are good and bad and all of that kind of stuff in the middle. But I do want to lend my opinion right off the bat and say these are my favorite adversary to play because I love that style of play. So it should be no, secret or coincidence that I love playing with major powers. But anyway, don't want to get too ahead of myself here. Just wanted to let that sort of lie up front and let you know that that's the sort of tone with which I'm coming into this. But I am quite aware, and I'll revisit the Marmite joke here. England are, it seems to be, very much a love or hate kind of thing. Most people seem to either really like them or really dislike them. You don't really see too much in the middle, although we will see some comments that land sort of in the middle as part of tonight's show. But yeah, generally speaking, it seems to be a thing that you either enjoy or you don't. And that kind of just seems to be it, really. So, but look, we'll get into it. And if you don't like them, or maybe you hate playing against them because you find them too difficult or something like that, that's kind of what the purpose of this whole thing is, as part of this Adversary series, is to really dig in, get into the weeds, see what they do, see how they function, and see if, hopefully you can kind of maybe come up with some kind of tips and tricks, as I say, to kind of help you out with that. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. Why do I keep doing that? I'm stuck on the panel, but I have it in front of me. I'm looking at it. So let's start. We'll go on the top left. I will finally bring it up on screen. The additional loss condition is going to be Proud and Mighty Capital, a very famous one, of course. This is very simply says, if 7 or more towns/cities are ever in a single land, the invaders win. So that is anywhere on your entire island. It's not per board. There's none of that sort of stuff. It is just one time. If any single land contains 7 or more buildings, you immediately lose the game. And of course, that's building. So that can be 6 towns, 1 city, 6 cities, 1 town, whatever. It doesn't matter. You will lose the game. Generally speaking, with England, they do tend to go like, town, city, whatever, town, city, town, city type of thing. They do a lot of builds. Their sort of play patterns are very much standard build actions, but just lots of them. So this is a tough loss condition. I will say that the loss condition is mostly relevant when you play these at the max level. Or let's maybe rephrase that to say it becomes more and more relevant the higher up in the levels you go. And that's usually true to say for basically every adversary with a loss condition. And it was certainly true of Habsburg, for example, last time out. Their level 6 very much contributed towards that loss condition, and there are others that do very similar. It's very true to say here, and it may be the most true to say about England. And of course, as we get through the levels and we look at level 6 in particular, we'll see why that's the case. And again, the whole purpose of this show is to talk through the adversaries at all of their levels and really dig into everything that they do and what makes them tick. And this is not a show for people to learn just level 6 England, right? So clearly here, I'm trying to give as much tips and tricks as I can in and around all of their actions and all of that. But I'll get back to that later on in terms of why the loss condition is more relevant as you get up higher, and maybe not so much of a threat if you're only playing in the first couple of levels. But anyway, that's the loss condition. Next up, we have the escalation, and of course, every single adversary has one of these, and it's called Building Boom. Again, quite famous, and it very simply reads, Building Boom, on each board with towns or cities, build in the land with the most towns or cities. Okay, here we go. We're getting the train rolling. We're getting the ball rolling, and we're starting with buildings. As I say, lots of build actions here. So this is the first way that they do it. On each board, first of all, with towns or cities, which for the vast majority of games you play, it's going to be every board that you do this on. But I can tell you, and this is again one of the first reasons why I said you should go and watch my playthrough. I'm going to be spoiling things about my playthrough because they're relevant for the episode. I actually managed to avoid this escalation, and during my playthrough, I had one of my boards completely clear of buildings, and that is the first time that's ever happened to me, and it was a hell of a ton of fun. So again, I talk about some unique play patterns and things that happen in that game. I'm talking really unique and really corner case stuff. So that was so much fun to be able to actually shut this off. Super cool. But for the vast majority of cases, as I say, every time you do your escalation here, you're going to look at every board, and then on each board, you're going to pick the land with the most buildings already, and you build there. So, first of all, if you have ties, you get to break them. As always, in Spirit Island, if there's a tie, you get to break it. So you get to pick which one of your lands, which is something. So that's one thing. The next thing is these are build actions. So these can be prevented. So if you have, for example, the disease token, of course, that's going to prevent this. If you have skip actions, skip all actions in target land this turn, that type of thing. This does create a build action. This is not going to be an invader action, so there is a distinct difference there, and some adversaries work in one way and some adversaries work in the other way. This is an example of an adversary which creates it's an invader action as opposed to an adversary action. That's the difference. They're two distinctly different things. And invader actions can generally be skipped by cards that say skip all invader actions in the land. So this is a case of something that can be prevented with those various mechanisms that I talked about. So that's that. After that, then, of course, we have 6 levels, which we always do. Now, they're a little bit unique and iconic in a certain way. So there's a couple of notes here about England before we get down through the levels. So first up is their difficulty rating. These were originally rated as a 10, so they came as part of the base game, I should point out as well here. So I was not playing back when it was only a base game. I've only been playing this game for a number of years after Jagged Earth was already released. So sort of I never knew the original sort of trio of adversaries, of which you had England, Sweden, and Brandenburg Prussia. They were rated as a 10 at the time. The same level as let's say Brandenburg Prussia in the same box, which were also a 10. But after the fact, and as kind of a sort of an errata over time, I don't believe it's been called an official errata, the same way the Blight card errata was, but more or less it's been announced by Eric and the team that, look, the devs have done enough testing to say that this is an 11, not a 10. So it is counted as an 11, and you can treat it as an 11 because it very much is distinctly more difficult than the 10s in the game. I said last time out that I had these as about a 10.75, and again, we talk about this as a relative rating across all of the adversaries. So I do find these are very distinctly the second most difficult adversary in the game, behind Russia, which we will get to as our last episode. But for now, look, they're extremely difficult. And what I was talking about here in terms of the levels here, if we take a look, there's a couple of iconic things that are happening. But if we look first of all at the fear cards, so usually, well, with every adversary, of course, at a base level, it'll be a 3-3-3. Here with England, we only go up as far as a 4-5-4, which is interesting. So that is joint second lowest, essentially. So Brandenburg Prussia are a 4-4-4, and then England and there's at least one other are joint on 4-5-4 as in second last place. I think there's either 2 or there might even be 3 that are tied on a 4-5-4. However, England, of course, have an extra rule that's going to change that, and we will get into the details of it when we get there. But as part of level 6, they're actually going to add an additional fear to the fear pool. And I just wanted to point this out now because it's quite interesting to see the way the fear cards work. If you look at them there, basically, let's take it from level 3 onwards. At level 3, we're already at a 4-5-4. So at level 3, we're 4-5-4. Then level 4, we go 4-5-5. Then at level 5, we stay at 4-5-5. And then at level 6, we drop back to 4-5-4. So it's very interesting to see that the way their fear cards are set up, it's actually the same at level 3 as it is at level 6. So very unique, very iconic for England here. But as I say, of course, with level 6, you add in that extra fear to the fear pool. And the net result of doing that actually gives you an adversary that has the most number of fear tokens needed to hit a terror level 4 or an overall fear victory. So that is, so count them up there. It's 4 + 5 + 4. 13 fear cards. 13 multiplied by the 5 is going to give you 65. Essentially, you have to hit 65 fear per player to beat England with a full terror level 4 win. Second place, and the most iconic for the number of fear cards, is Scotland. So we talked about Scotland, of course, before. They have a 664 deck, and that is a total number of 16 fear cards. So they have 3 more fear cards than England do, but they actually only go up to 64 total fear tokens to get there. So it's 1 less fear required to beat Scotland at tier level 4 than it is for England. So that's something to bear in mind here. England are technically the hardest to beat with fear. Now, that's going to come back later on. Don't worry about that. So that's just to go and give you the gist for that and give you the feel for that. The detail and the difficulty is coming in the text on these abilities, not on necessarily the number of fear cards. Let me tell you that. So let's go rewind and let's go and look at level 1. Level 1 is going to be called Indentured Servants Earn Land. And again, it's funny, I'm already getting ahead of myself here, but I talked about this, I think, in one of the previous episodes where I was reading through all of the abilities, and like half of these are like, I never knew what that's called. I knew Proud and Mighty Capital. That's a very iconic one from a name, I think, a naming perspective. People know what that's called. And there's certainly another one in here, level 3 and 4, which has a very iconic name as well. But more or less the rest of these, I had no idea what that's what this ability is called. I just know them as England 5, England 6, or whatever. But yes, this one is called Indentured Servants Earn Land, and most people will be familiar with what it does, maybe more than what it's called. This says invader build actions affect lands without invaders if they are adjacent to at least 2 towns or cities before the build action. So, first of all, invader build actions. Again, we're talking about builds. We're talking about build actions here. So similar to what we said with the escalation, all of this kind of stuff functions very similarly in terms of can be prevented and all that kind of stuff. But again, here we are, we're looking at build actions and we're looking about getting build actions forced down their neck right from the very beginning. So what are they saying here? They're saying that invader build actions affect lands without invaders. So if the land is empty, it is still going to build if it is adjacent to at least 2 buildings before the build action. Oh boy. Adjacency builds. That's what this is, and everybody knows it. Everyone who plays against England will know this. This is the adjacency build. Super tough, super iconic, massive part of the identity of how England function is this rule. What can you say, really? It's about adjacency here. So, we talked before on the Habsburg episode last time out about how good Isolate was for a couple of their abilities which are related to adjacency. And here we are again against England, and we're talking about adjacency again. So absolutely, let's start to keep in mind, Isolate against this adversary can be key. Adjacency. If you're adjacent to 2 buildings, you do a build in an empty land. If you don't have any adjacencies and the land is isolated, it's not going to build. Now, needless to say, if there's an explorer in there and you cut off adjacencies, it will build like normal. So let's not get ahead of ourselves too much. But if you manage to get the land empty and you cut off the adjacencies, it will not build. And that can be absolutely huge. Let me get a beer. Let me get a sip of a beer here. I'm definitely getting very thirsty. It's barely even quenching. It's so thin. Like the thing is just gone. The suds, the dishwater suds, have more or less all evaporated. There's no body in it at all. It's just light and nothingness in a glass. Having said that, I've drank nearly a full glass of it at this stage. So probably looking at me going, "Well, look, if you don't like it that much, don't drink it." But it's not like me to leave a glass of beer behind. I have to tell you that, especially not when I'm thirsty. So we will be finishing the beer. That is for absolute sure. Now, next up, level 2, criminals and malcontents. During setup, on each board, add a city to land number 1 and a town to land number 2. Easy stuff in terms of complexity, not necessarily easy in terms of difficulty. It's a setup thing. So we go ahead and we add a city in land number 1 and we add a town to land number 2. Let's of course remember, land number 2 is where our city usually starts. So now we're going to end up with 2 buildings in that land, and we're going to end up with 2 cities on our coast. And of course, we've already seen level 1 talks about adjacency builds when we have proximity to other buildings. So then straight away at level 2, we go ahead and we add 2 more buildings to the board, which is going to make things quite difficult. Now, it is worth bearing in mind here, excuse me, these both go on the coast, which is somewhat good news. If these were pushed inland, or maybe you had one of these in like land number 4, number 5, something like that, it's going to get very, very difficult to have to kind of do any kind of pocketing tactics. And by pocketing here, I'll just define that term if you're not familiar with it. Pocketing is essentially where you create a pocket or a section of your island where there are no adjacent buildings when you attempt to explore. You essentially shut off sources of exploration on parts of your island. And thus you're getting ahead of that tempo. You're very much playing ahead of the invaders so that you're stopping them ever even exploring, let alone building. So here, pocketing, yes, it functions. If we think about pocketing in the context of England here, and we'll talk about this later on, but just to kind of mention it here, that pocketing against England, yes, you can shut down the explorer source, but similarly, if you can kind of do the same sort of thing, shutting down adjacent buildings and towns is now going to have the knock-on effect of turning off, if you can, that level 1 with the adjacency builds. So what I'm mentioning here, of course, is putting those buildings right onto the coast at the beginning of the game gives you a bit of a chance. It's very challenging, and we will hear from plenty of people about this, and I'll talk about it myself later on, but it gives you an opportunity and a chance to maybe go ahead and use that as a strategy against them. So let's bear that in mind. Now, level 3, high immigration. Level 1, high immigration 1. And this is the one I said that people will know the name of. There it is there, high immigration tile. I'll hold it up to the camera. Let's have a look. There it is, high immigration. Very, very iconic. Maybe the most iconic thing about England. Maybe not. Maybe the adjacency builds are the most iconic. England is just ripping in iconic rules, let's be honest. But this is tough. Okay, what does it do? So you put the high immigration tile on the invader board to the left of the ravage space. And there's a nice little neat space for it there, thankfully. And it says, the invaders take this build action, so it's an extra build action, and they take this build action each invader phase before ravaging. And cards slide left from ravage to it, and then from it to the discard pile. And then you remove this tile when a stage 2 card slides onto it, putting that card in the discard pile. So, let's break this down. This is a tile that you're going to put on your board to the left of your ravage space. And you can see here it's got build written underneath it, and it's got a little arrow to say discard. This is an extra invader action that the invaders get every turn. So as we know, every turn you usually do your ravage, then you do your build, and then you do your explore. And then when you do the explore, everything shifts left, and when something ravages, it then goes to the discard pile. Now we've got an extra action, so that after a terrain ravages, then it moves over to the left and it goes onto this tile instead. And then next turn, that land is going to build. And then you do all of your regular ravage build and explores. So again, extra build actions. This adversary it's just build actions from every angle, and it's super, super tough. And of course, this additional sort of action economy that the invaders are getting creates lots of opportunities for overlap. From we talk plenty in the past with other adversaries about back-to-backs and sort of getting the same terrain. I call it runner. So you've got this kind of overlap and the impact and the difficulty on them. This is just giving us more opportunities for that, and we'll dig into that later on. But it's really tough. It sits there, you do the ravage, it goes onto the build, then you build, and then it's gone. Thankfully, this is only going to sit there long enough for a stage 2 card to slide onto it, and then the card's going to go on the discard, which is good news. So of course you will have nothing's going to get there for a couple turns. Let's talk about that first. So that's going to sit and play No card is going to slide onto that until the third turn of the game. So on the first turn, your first invader card builds. Then on the second turn, it ravages. And then on the third turn, that same card is going to build. So this doesn't come up until turn 3, which is good news. And I should really stop now and point out, I meant to point it out before, England have an unedited invader deck, which is good as well. So that does kind of play into this here. So they have the standard 3 1s, 4 2s, and 5 3s. So there's no messing, there's no getting rid of stage 1 cards or any of that kind of stuff. It's going to be your 1 1 1 2 2 2 2. So that's pretty decent news. So you are going to get 3 1s onto this before that stage 2 cards goes onto it. So you'll get essentially 3 builds on this. Your 3 stage your 3 stage 1 cards are all going to do that extra build, and then when the stage 2 card goes on there, it just goes into the discard. So you'll never actually do the high immigration build for a stage 2 card. So that is pretty good news. Let's go on to level 2, or the next level, level 4. High immigration full. The extra build tile remains out the entire game. Okay, fair enough then. That's that put to bed. Anyway, that's that bit of good news put to bed. We may forget that. So, okay, it's just going to keep doing this for the whole game. Nasty. Lots of extra builds. They're building from the escalations. They're building from the adjacency builds. They're building from the high immigration. They're building all left, right, and center. Okay, they're going to have lots of buildings on the board. Hopefully we can deal with these buildings somehow. We can just kill the buildings. That should be fine, right? Level 5, local autonomy. Towns and cities have +1 held. Oh, God. Oh, so they're building everywhere. They have +1 health. They just keep building. They just add so much health to the board. Every time they build, it's just another. Towns have 3 health. Cities have 4 health. It's a disaster. This is again, when we're talking about iconic rule sets in this game, this is maybe even more iconic than the last one. +1 held on every building for the whole game. No, this is not durable from Habsburg Livestock that you can shut down by putting a blight in the land. No, none of that. Forget about it. You can't migrate the town somewhere where it stops being difficult. It's just difficult everywhere on the board at all times. This is a 2-point increase in difficulty from level 4 to level 5, and you feel every single micro point of those 2 points. It's horrendous. Okay, well, at least we've done surely all of the building that we're going to do as far as this thing is concerned. We're not getting any more builds at this point, surely. Independent resolve, level 6. During setup, add an additional fear to the fear pool per player in the game. Well, we already talked about that, so I gave you a heads up on that one. So yes, every player is now getting 5 fear per pool instead of 4 fear per pool, and that is really, really difficult. That is going to add an additional 13 fear to the fear pool overall. That has to be it, right? Surely there's nothing else in this level. During any invader phase where you resolve no fear cards, perform the build from high immigration twice. Oh, God. Oh, God. High immigration twice. That is just dreadful. Yeah, we did say build actions. It's build actions and build actions and nothing but build actions, except for extra buildings and +1 held everywhere and extra fear in the pool and yeah, it's just awful. And by awful, I mean absolutely fantastic. It's the greatest thing ever. It's so difficult and it's so big and swingy and meaty and it's just, I love it. It's so hard. It's genuinely very, very difficult. And yeah, we're going to hear from plenty of people why it's difficult and for whom it's difficult and all of those kind of things. But look, that last ability there, perform the build from the high immigration twice, that gives you so many build actions that are happening from every different angle. If you miss on the fear card, you go build from high immigration, then you go ravage, then you go build again, and then if an escalation comes off on the on the Explorer, you build again. That can be very easily and very frequently is 4 build actions on one turn. And oh, by the way, that might happen all in the same terrain. Or actually, excuse me, all in the same land. You may build 4 times in one land, depending on the order of the cards and all of that. And as we can probably clearly see, or if you haven't already, hopefully now it's very clear to see why the loss condition of 7 or more buildings in a single land is very, very real. Very challenging, very difficult, and especially, as I say, with that level 6, now you can probably see what I was talking about before. The double build on the high immigration puts you in massive danger of hitting that loss condition. So it's fantastic. I absolutely love it. Well, what more can I say, really? Probably not that much more on that one, because we're going to go to the community interaction and we're going to hear what all of you have to say. So let me take a breath before I do that. What are we now? We're 40 minutes in. That's not too bad. I think it was an hour before I started the community interaction against that in the Habsburg episode. So that's not too bad. Habsburg episode went long. Let's be honest. I think that one was nearly 3 hours. How I can get away with sitting in here and talking to that wall for 3 hours is I'm still trying to figure it all out myself, to be honest. But thankfully and hopefully you're along for the ride, and certainly some of you are. And I've had some really nice feedback, and I'm really thankful to hear it. So it's brilliant to be here and be able to do this, and I'm very much enjoying myself. And will continue to very much enjoy myself as we talk about my favorite adversary in the game, England. So look, let's start with the dislikes, because we're going to get them out of the way. We get the negative Nancy's and Nellies out of the way, and then we'll move on to the people who enjoy themselves. Starting off with my friend Cappy here has a great and long comment here, and I should probably mention now there are quite a few people coming in with very detailed and rich feedbacks and inputs as part of this, so I really wanted to keep them in because there's lots of really cool things happening in here, but may go a little bit longer on the community interaction this time out. We shall see. But we're starting off with Cappy, and Cappy says, my biggest qualm with England is how strongly they invalidate certain spirits, and we will hear this multiple times, believe me. I like rolling randoms, and England is downright unfun for some spirits. Too many spirits feel like they must abandon their identity and pray to the major power deck for survival. I have stubbornly tried too many times attempting solo whirlwind versus England, and I would not recommend it. I think it's kind of telling that when new players ask for tips versus most adversaries, people will give advice. But versus England, people often start by saying which spirits you should play as opposed to kind of what tactics or maybe strategies you should do, which is a fair point. With the adjacency builds, they're going to put down a bunch of plastic. With the capital, you can't clump everything into a single land. With the high immigration, they put down even more plastic. And then with all of this plastic on the board, ravages are going to get really scary. And with the extra health, you're going to need some really beefy majors to take out all the invaders. But then also, with the final rule, you need your fear generation to stay consistent. Otherwise, they'll drop 7 health of buildings into the high immigration lands via the double build. And yes, 7 health of buildings, of course, is a town and a city. 7 health. Ugh, gross. I partially think my mindset is the biggest conflict with England. I want to use any spirit and feel like they've got the tools to have a shot. England says no to that. But I understand why people may enjoy them. Some spirits are stronger and trounce the easier adversaries, and England gives those spirits at the upper end of the bell curve a challenge and a chance to run down their full presence tracks. But that comes at the cost of some spirits being left behind. Very, very good from Cappy here. And I actually asked them to kind of, did they have any more to say about which spirits get left behind? And they came back with another really, really good response here, which I wanted to put in here. So they put a couple of spirits, and actually loads of people went into the spirits as part of this community input, which I loved. So we'll obviously dig really into all of that. And a lot of the same names do come up quite a bit here, which is not surprising. So Cappy says, original River struggled. I haven't tried Haven versus England, but I expect that to give them a fighting chance now, which is a good point. I'd like to see that myself. People often use Shadows as an example, but I think he isn't at the bottom, especially with aspects. Shadows gets the 3/3 fairly quickly, which is 3 energy and 3 card plays, has a +3 energy growth, and generates a bunch of fear, so I think they do okay. Devouring Teeth took me 7 games to win solo. I think Rising Heat would also take multiple games, but haven't tried it yet. Base Wildfire is sad, and that is very true. I think Finder is in a tough spot with the lack of fear generation, but then he says in parentheses here, but your recent game shows they aren't completely hopeless and they just need a little luck on their side with precise gameplay. And that is a little bit of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge to the conversation we'll have later. And then he says, Base Shroud was sad. With the introduction of aspects, I think a bunch of spirits have a better shot. It is still quite tough, likely not favoured, but they aren't hopeless. And the last paragraph in here I think is really interesting. So let's dig into this. England also punishes strategy mismatches. Winning with Fangs is perfectly doable. Create early tempo and generate consistent fear to avoid double high immigration. Winning with Keeper is perfectly doable. Stall a bit, super grow, and then start punching back hard. But pairing these two together leads to a very difficult game because Keeper is so lax early that Fangs can't keep up the fear to dodge all the double high immigrations, and the high immigrations kills Fangs. Then in the end game, Fangs is a liability because they don't scale up nearly well enough to handle the atrocious board state. So these two spirits that are decent enough versus England in isolation get worse when paired together. Love that. Absolutely love that. That's a fantastic little paragraph there. And I think it goes such a long way to backing up so much of what I promote as part of this channel. And you see me do this in every playthrough that I've done, probably to date, every single one of them. My turn 1 is slow. It's ponderous. I'm not going to say it's boring. I hope it's not boring. But it takes time. And I'm talking through, I'm really going through the strategies. I'm really thinking about the whole game on the very first turn. And you have to have a strategy. How do your spirits play? What are their kits? What's their goals? How do they function? Do they play with tempo? Do they play with scaling? What types of pieces do they interact with? How do their growth patterns work? What flexibilities do they have? Are they rigid? Are they flexible? All of these kind of things. You can answer a lot of those questions before you ever draft a single card or ever see a single invader card from the invaders or really do anything. Before you even start the game, you can sit down and look at your spirit panel or know your spirit well and understand what is your role in this game. Magic the Gathering, my favorite thing to talk about after Spirit Island. There was a very famous article that was written by one of the content creators at the sort of beginning of the content creation, let's say, of that game, which is many years ago. And it was an article called "Who's the Beatdown," written by Mike Flores. If anyone knows this, you'll know what I'm talking about. And it was quite a short article, but it was really groundbreaking. And because it talked about understanding of role in a game of Magic, and how understanding your role in the game at the very beginning of the game can allow you to outplay an opponent who doesn't understand role as much. And it can affect all of your decision making. If you know at the beginning of a game how your overall deck and strategy is generally configured versus theirs. Again, let's not talk about the specifics of any game or any cards in my hand or anything. If I know that my deck is generally situated in such a way versus yours, I should play my game in a way that takes advantage of those certain specificities of the decks, of the general strategies and decks. If you're a very fast deck and I'm a slow deck, when we're playing a game, I'm not going to push and push and push and really go in a certain direction that veers away from my game plan and role. Even if I've maybe drawn cards that lead me in that direction a little bit, I don't want to get too far away from my role in a game, or I will start to lose the advantages which I inherently have naturally in a particular matchup. And here is a perfect example what Cappy's talking about with Fangs and Keeper, where in isolation they each have their own ways to beat England. They're different ways. They approach the game differently, and they have their strengths and they have their weaknesses. And if you play those in a true solo environment, you can push in that certain direction. If I'm Fangs, I know I need to push tempo. I have to create early tempo. I have to draft in such a way. I have to play my cards in such a way. I need to consistently gain fear, because I know if I hit a double high immigration, I'm toast. So you play in that sort of way. Your spirit is configured and set up to play that way. Keeper, completely different. It's much slower. It might allow a double high immigration or two in lieu of scaling, because it knows that it can outscale England later on. But when you put the two together and they completely conflict on each other, the weaknesses essentially compound one another, and it makes it an overall much weaker game. And I talked about that last time out when I wondered and mused about the Finder and Stranded situation, whether or not their weaknesses might compound each other to be an overall worse situation. But we'll talk about that one later on. Cappy, thank you very much. I probably spent about 10 full minutes on that comment there. I got all sorts of pulled in all sorts of directions about who's the beatdown in Magic the Gathering, but hopefully that little trip down memory lane for me was at least slightly enlightening for you. Now, we'll have a little bit of beer. It's not aging well. I'm not gonna lie. It's not getting better with time. That's for sure. I'll pour some more of that in a little bit, and we'll finish it out in not too long. Now, Taste the Rainbow. It's so straightforward and brutal up to 5. At 6, it's just oppressive. 2 sentences, nice and easy. At 6, it is rather oppressive. I will not disagree with you, Taste the Rainbow. I love it, but I do agree it is pretty oppressive. Now, the power of stories. England is by far my least liked adversary, and I don't think it's very well designed. England shuts down too many means of interaction with it, effectively making explorer control and land clearing useless and severely punishing damage-based strategies. Scotland and France feel like much fairer, more interesting takes on a build-heavy adversary, and the durable loophole that we see in Habsburg is a much more interactive take than straight health inflation. So we already talked about that Habsburg situation there. That England was also by far the hardest adversary at the game's release. Warped discussion of what high-level play looks like for years until we got some more variety of punishing adversaries. Funny, I'm not really going to disagree with basically anything that people throws at England in this episode. Despite the fact that I love them, I do appreciate and understand that there are design flaws here. Design flaws in the sense that it shuts down certain things in the game. If you turn off avenues against something, it is a design flaw. Let's be honest here. If you can state that X percent, and X being a fairly high number, of your roster can't realistically take on England, in an average game, that's a design flaw. Let's be honest here. And I won't fight that. In terms of difficulty, I don't think necessarily that overall difficulty is a problem. I think there has to be the most difficult thing. For me, as I say, it's Russia, but England, it's almost there as well. So there has to be the most difficult thing. And I think if you can identify that difficulty is fairly well distributed or evenly balanced across all spirits, I don't think it's a problem that something is too hard for spirits to beat, or too hard for the average player to beat. Let's use that as a better descriptor. I don't think that's a problem necessarily. Now, we did hear on the TED episode that he talked about overall difficulty and complexity being a kind of a problem when we talk about power creep. So that's a different conversation. But here we're not necessarily talking about that power creep sort of element. But I do think for me that I don't mind that something is very, very challenging. I like a challenge personally. Maybe not everybody else likes the same challenge that I would, and that's completely fine. But here again, we're not really talking about, I'm using this as a reference to say that that's not what the Power of Stories is talking about here. They're talking about it being too challenging for specific spirits and specific kits, and that is a problem. Because then it's like, okay, well, maybe half of the roster are okay, and maybe not half, but let's say 25% or something like that, or 20% have a big problem against England. That is a bit of a design flaw. So I do absolutely concede and accept that, and I think, as I said, there are other people who pick up on this. Omnivol says, England is my least played adversary. It is not a question of them making the game too difficult. I did not do this on purpose. They came in and said this. I forgot that they were going to say this. So it's not a question of them making the game too difficult. They're just boring as hell. Now, this is interesting. Other adversaries have ways of making the game more difficult in a fun and exciting way that offers an engaging pace to the game. England's way of adding difficulty sucks the fun out of the game for me. I can appreciate that they are the ideal adversary for some spirits or powers to display their quote-unquote late game capabilities, and I have played a few games where this was true for me too. However, most of the time they offer a dull and frustrating game where you have to carefully navigate your every move only to see it barely make a difference at all. No matter how good of a read you have on the board, they will build and they will keep building, and their buildings are going to be a bitch to deal with. On the contrary, against other adversaries, it's much more possible to quote unquote outplay them by navigating the board correctly. It's also a question of variety. I have a few spirits I love and play often, but I generally like changing things up and playing somewhat different each time. England's non-stop building, +1 HP rule, and fear modifiers makes the majority of spirits feel powerless and at the mercy of the decks. And they say all decks, power, events, and invader cards. The one thing I truly do like about England is that they make Isolate, which is otherwise not the most exciting ability, very strong. It really changes the power level of some powers, and it's a welcome perspective shift. Okay. Omnivore is gloves off here. They are absolutely going for it, going for the juggler. Some of this I agree with, and some of it I disagree with. I mean, look, boring as hell for me, definitely not. I love it, but that's a completely impartial, a completely biased view. It is just my sort of subjective opinion on that. We can like and dislike different things, so that's just the way it is, and that's completely fine. Some of this in here, let me go back and read it. So most of the time you carefully navigate your every move, only see it barely makes a difference at all. You know, no matter how good of a read you have, they will build, they'll keep building, and they're going to be difficult to deal with. And on the contrary, other adversaries, it's much more possible to outplay them. Do I agree with this? Partially. In a way, partially. I think they will build and they will keep building is completely true. It's very, very difficult to shut down England when it comes to that kind of building perspective. They just keep building and they will get through your layers of pocketing and isolation. It just will happen. So I think that part is fair enough to say that it's very frustrating because there is more of an outplaying sort of vibe to some of the other adversaries than there maybe is here. But I don't think it's fair to say that it will barely make a difference at all. I still think there's plenty of counterplay to England, and I think the nuance in how you use either accept or navigate those problems is really important here. And I don't believe that it's fair to just kind of, maybe, distill England down to, oh, well, I just dig through the major deck. If I find the right major, GG. If I don't, there's nothing I can do kind of thing. And that's not what Omnivore's saying here. But I tend to feel like there's maybe a little bit of that vibe with England, just as a kind of a general feeling, not necessarily anything that any one person says in any of these comments here, but I sort of always had that feeling where people kind of do this, oh, well, it's major power bingo, and if you miss, it's like, there's nothing you can do. I think there is definitely a lot more nuance to it than maybe people might want to believe. And that sort of really grueling, never-ending nature of the buildings can often make it feel like that's not the case. And again, I'll refer you to my playthrough where you can see the absolute extreme of shutting them down, which I have never done before and probably will never do again. So it is absolutely true to say that this barely make a difference at all can be very wrong and very false in some games. A small portion of games, you can have a very big impact on how much they encroach on space. You can shut them down if you go all in on shutting them down. Is that a good idea, though? That's the question. I will talk about that later on. But look, Omnivore, absolutely appreciate the comment here, and I totally understand that there is a sort of an oppressive feeling about these, and some people just don't like it at all. So by no means here take my my feedback and criticism on what you're saying as a problem. It's good conversation, and I appreciate you providing. Now, okay, Poetry 5990. I need to generate fear. Okay. I need powerful majors. Okay. I need to defend and stall for time. Okay. So this sounds like a game where if you don't draw certain key cards, you just lose. For example, Paralyzing Fright. And again, I didn't do this on purpose. I just went on a little bit of a rant there about this whole finding certain cards or bust, and I completely forgot that somebody had actually mentioned something similar to this. But you can see the kind of vibe here. Again, it's not exactly what Poetry is saying, but it's getting at it. Here they say, many people say that England diversifies the game, but isn't it actually narrowing it? Most strategies are invalid against England, and it only encourages growth-based play. Many also claim that England pushes spirits to fully develop, but in reality, many spirits' unique abilities upon full growth become much less valuable. Again, very strong words here. There's a continuation of this, though, so I won't respond yet. I did respond in the comments, and I asked Poetry here to kind of clarify what they meant in that last sentence about many unique abilities upon full growth become much less valuable. And then we had a little bit of a back and forth, and then at the end, Poetry came back with this. After saying it out loud, I feel like my post doesn't have much value. England really does offer a truly satisfying ultimate challenge. It's precisely because it's difficult, rigid, and shuts down many spirits' signature abilities that defeating it feels like the ultimate test. If England didn't exist, people would just use 6-6 as the benchmark for evaluating spirits and setting new personal standards, and that might actually make things worse. Both River and Shadows can beat England, and Russia similarly shuts down a lot of spirits. So I do not want anybody listening for them to think like I was somehow shutting Poetry down in our discussion. I did not do that in any way. It seems like I was actually agreeing with them, and it seems like throughout our conversation they just came to this realization that actually I was wrong the first time, which was pretty funny. But they sort of came around and maybe almost had a sense of realization that, as they say here, it's precisely because it does those very oppressive shut down type of things that it is so satisfying to beat them. And that is my opinion. That's very much where I come from. I like that it makes so many things challenging and it shuts off so much of what some spirits can do, because then you have to find different ways around it. And there are comments about that, so I won't really add any more than that. Now, that's all the dislikes. Speaking of dislikes, I'm going to pour myself a glass of beer here. Hang on a second. Pour the rest of this beer here. Get this out of the way. Oh, stop. It's not a good day when you're talking about getting your beer out of the way. Well, unfortunately, that's where we are today. We'll have something better for next time. What are we? Russia next. I want to see if I can find myself a Russian beer. I'm sure there are Russian beers. There's definitely some fancy off licenses about the place. And I will say as well, there are actually some very good English craft brewery companies that I wanted to go and get a beer from. Thornbridge are one that I really, really like, but I couldn't get myself over to the fancy off license today because I was too busy preparing this episode. What else have you? You have Beavertown is another one. They've got a nice couple of beers. Neck Oil is a famous one. Session IPA is quite nice as well. So that's a little bit more widely available. But they're two good breweries. Thornbridge is very good in particular. Jaipur, I believe, is their signature beer. Very, very good. If anyone's a fan, let me know in the comments. But anyway, that's all the dislikes. Oh yeah, I said it was porn beer. I'll actually have some. It is still cold. I do, of course, off shot here. You can see have my ice bath for the beer, which I have to say was a revelation. Figuring that out the first day and starting that process of putting beer in the ice bath off to the side. The first couple of times I think I did playthroughs or videos, I didn't have anything cooling my beer and I was drinking warm beer by the end. But the ice bath does the trick. Now, likes. So now we're on the like train. Now we're very much in people who enjoy the Kingdom of England. So let's get into it. Absolute Black says, I hated England as an early beginner. Oh, this isn't a good start. But trying to understand new spirits. Level 5 especially felt insane, unfair, super game warping. But honestly, nowadays, playing level 5 to 6 by default, England has to be my favourite adversary. Excuse me. They don't not warp spirit balance, but they feel the closest to difficulty plus plus, similar to a normal roguelike Ascension system. Now, I don't know what that means. I presume they're referring to the Ascension board game, the deck builder board game. I played it once and I had a lot of fun, but I couldn't tell you what a roguelike difficulty plus plus system is, but maybe that's what they mean. Anyway, I like that games go longer, hold that frenetic tension longer. Every game of Spirit Island feels like you're going to lose for a bit before you ramp ahead, and England holds that the most consistently for the most time. I like that playing against a lot of level 6 England made me better at evaluating the board a few steps out. Helps me think about how to avoid the most explored builds for different terrain flips a turn or two ahead of time instead of always reacting to builds and ravages. Love this visualization thing. Hugely important skill for a game like this. You hear about this in chess all the time, how good people are at visualization. Visualizing a board, next turn, following turn, after all these different pieces, being able to see that in your mind's eye. Hugely important skill in this game as well. That's what they picked up on here. And they say England's sixth helped them improve it. They do finally close out and say, I sort of hate drawing majors and hoping, which England kind of forces onto some spirits, but I just don't play those spirits into England. Ha ha. What the hell was that? That's better. Laugh. Every spirit or adversary has matchups I don't like. I think my only real complaint is some games we go, oh, oops, forgot that event existed. There goes the lost condition. Want to roll it back or set it up again? Which is pretty unfun and awkward. Lol. Okay, so... oh, God. Anyway, yeah, look, Absolute Black, thanks for this. Really, really good. I do want to point out here, I hated England as an early beginner. I remember the first time I read the England card. I had only played the game, I think, twice, something like that. I just bought the box. I think we played it once. Maybe this was like we played a second game. It was the first day I think we ever played it. And obviously we were just playing against like the base game. I think first game we played base game. Second game we maybe played like one adversary on difficulty 0, something like that. And I took out the England card and I didn't know anything about anything at this point in time. And I took it out and I read it. And me and my friends were reading the thing and we didn't even understand the idea about the cumulative abilities, you know, that it was adding everything on top of each other. We were just reading this and it was like every ability was like on its own impossible. You know, it was like we were like, is this cumulative? Nah, this can't be cumulative. There's no way. We didn't understand that this was like whatever, like difficulty, we didn't really understand the difficulty numbers or anything like that. We thought it was just like you do 1 or you do 2 or you do 3. But we're like reading this and it was like every ability in isolation sounds impossible. And then when I went online later, I looked up and I read and I understood, I read the rule book or something and I was like, lads, that's cumulative. They all get added together. And I remember being in complete disbelief that this can be a possible game mode that people play. was like, at the time, of course, it was like super hard to win at like base 0 or whatever, we like just about won at difficulty 0 or whatever it was the second time we played or something. And I'm reading this card, I'm like, that is just literally physically impossible. So it's one of them things where, especially when you're newer and you just have no clue about how you could possibly get around those abilities, pretty funny. But yeah, obviously as time goes on and you start to learn the tricks and all that, which I will be telling you later on, I'll be letting you in on the insider knowledge later on, believe me folks. And it can be done. It certainly can be done. Now, Chet for T Maggie 123. There's my friend Maggie coming back. I will get your name perfectly right first time without hesitation. One day I will. I like long games that England creates. You really need to think about long-term benefits and build your spirit. Unfortunately, the adversary gives you some time for it because it's not very fast, making it feel fair but still difficult. Playing around the lost condition is also interesting, and it makes me think more about some of my actions. I just enjoy the general approach. The only thing I don't like about England is the level 5 rule. The +1 held on all buildings is pretty annoying, and it makes some cards like Blazing Renewal and Forest of Living Obsidian almost useless. Now, I'll pick up on those cards again later on, so I won't stop on them here, but it is absolutely true that the +1 held is pretty annoying. Of course it is, and it does certainly make some cards in the game a lot less helpful or useful. So again, as I say, we'll definitely pick up on that later. Now, Spotty Rhyme says, I used to really dislike England, but I've grown to really like them, due to being one of the few adversaries that really feels like you always have to go to the end game to beat them. So you get to play a longer game where you really feel your spirit's strength. My major complaint about them is the loss condition. I don't hate it, even though it can be brutal, but I really dislike that it's not formatted like HME, where it takes effect at the end of the fast. And we talked about that, of course, during the HME episode and how important that is and why that was a thing that they kind of learned. I think Ted talked about that as well during our interview. That was a kind of a learning they had over time. And most of that learning probably came from England, of course. They say, I think that change might make England, quote unquote, too easy, but it's really annoying to lose to an event. It also makes some unfortunate invader deck orders, like doubling up on terrains, especially punishing depending on the order. And they say mostly just a skill issue. Spotty Rhyme, I wouldn't say mostly just a skill issue. Some deck orders are appalling against England. It's just absolutely true. And of course, for some spirits, it just becomes nigh impossible. As we've seen. I personally wouldn't change a single thing on the England card. I think it's perfect as it is, as for what it is. Do I concede that there are design flaws from the inclusion and diversity, if you want to call it that, for all of the spirits to be involved and not discriminated against? Yeah, of course there are. Like I said, some portion of the roster just simply cannot keep up. And what can I say? From a design perspective for the game, are there portions of this that would need to be redesigned? Yes, absolutely. From a better coverage perspective, 100%. From my personal enjoyment perspective, how I like to play this game, I would not change anything. I would just put those 20% of spirits to the side. I think I said it on the channel before. I don't get to play a lot of Spirit Island, first of all. And when I do, that kind of thing that Cappy talked about before is like jamming like 10 games of Whirlwind into England until you beat it. That's not for me. That's not my style of game. Not that I wouldn't necessarily enjoy doing that. If I had infinite time and I had no children, that could be something that I would really enjoy doing. Technically, if I had the time to do it, I would quite enjoy sitting down and trying to figure out a matchup, something like a River or a Whirlwind into England, and see what ways you can kind of change the build. That could be really, really fun. But that is not my play style, and it's not the types of games I play now because I just do not get time to play this game. And when I do, I don't want to quote unquote waste it by just jamming 10 losses in a row into an almost unwinnable matchup. I'd rather just take a match that is of somewhere in that kind of median range. Median's probably the wrong mathematical term here, but something in the middle there where it's a not unwinnable and not unlosable matchup. Someone in the middle where I'm going to have a tough time, and I like playing against tough difficulties, but it's absolutely going to be winnable for me with pretty standard gameplay and growth modes. And that, of course, can go all the way up to 6-6, as I've talked about. So I love that extreme grueling stuff where you really have to figure out the massive optimization, but not from my spirit is just structurally wrong and structurally, unsound into this particular thing. So anyway, that's just that. Mostly there's a skill issue. No spotty rhyme, I would not say that. But again, stick out for some tips. You may just find an L trick or two that might help you with the losing to the loss condition. Now, World Peace Bringer. Anything major oriented is fun and effective against England. Therefore, Starlight, Nourishing Earth, and Stone work quite well. As for major powers, Paralyzing Fright and Rumbling Earthquakes are, of course, instant takes. Badlands are also quite useful since you need a lot of repeatable damage. The most enjoyable matchups for me were Vengeance, Fear Generation on all builds, which is super cool. Roots, you want the Incarnate in the Escalation land, which I can see being really good. Sparking Lightning and Gaze, because both because of Badlands loot usage. So some really nice ones there. Some spirits that I absolutely love have been mentioned in there. And I also find that Isolate and Pocketing can be extra effective against England. It feels great to deny a double build when you didn't unlock a fear card that turn. I will definitely talk about that later. Now, I always need to get myself into the mindset of play to win, don't play to not lose against England, more so than against other adversaries. England requires big turns. Brilliant. World Peace Bringer, fantastic. Love this. Some really, really nice spirits mentioned in here. And I love that last line, or is the second last line. Play to win, don't play to not lose. I'm pretty sure on my second podcast episode all the way back 6 months ago or however long it was, I said this and I talked about this and I said we'll pick up on this on later episodes. Now is not the time necessarily to pick up on it in detail, but I do want to. I just love this mantra. This is like my mantra when I play games, and I used to have it in Magic the Gathering all the time, and I have it in this game all the time as well. You can get into patterns of play where you're trying to stop yourself losing, but in doing so, you're actually making it more likely that you lose or more likely that you don't win. The two are not mutually exclusive. And we've heard, I think, Ted and you may have even been Eric on the KSP talk about this before, about how the win condition and the loss condition are on different axes in this game. So it's not a kind of how do you call it, net zero, or how do you call that, zero sum sort of game where if you're all the way out here from a win condition perspective, you're that far away from losing, and if you're all the way back here from as close to a loss, you're miles away from winning. In this game, you can be very close to both. Of course, you can be nowhere near either as well. But this idea of when you have to be able to identify in a game, when am I playing not to lose, and when can I turn the corner and start to play to win instead? And actually, there's a follow-up to this where Beta Jin responded, and I don't often put responses here, but this was a really good one. Beta Jin came in and said, I see your play to win, don't play to not lose mindset, and I have a mindset that on the surface seems quite different, but I think may end up being pretty in line with that. I'd sum it up as something like, don't lose in as few actions as possible. And I love this. So they say, I think it is very important to drag out the game by quote unquote not losing, since England is almost always going to be a protracted battle. But the trap is to spend a lot of effort doing that, when you can actually hang on against England while committing very few resources. And as you minimize resource expenditure, you will be able to hit those big turns later on, those big turns to do the damage needed to finish them off. And this is huge. I almost could have put this into my actually strategy and sort of how to beat them later on. And I kind of do. I probably talk around this topic later, but I want to stop and I want to again reiterate it here. You need to, I love this, it's brilliant. You need to spend as few actions as possible stopping yourself losing. And sometimes that means take risks. This is the other thing I talked about way back in the first episode as well, is that you have to identify the spots where you will allow certain portion of the time for you to lose, because you're reducing the amount of effort you're dedicating to that not losing, and you're instead apportioning much more of your actions to the winning the game instead. And the earlier you do that in a game, and the better you can identify where those risks need to be put, the easier it will be for you to actually turn the corner and actually get over the line. Now, big obvious example of this will be something like a skip, right? A ravage skip or a build skip. Vital Strain to the Earth has a card. Oh, can't remember what it's called. I have it written down later on. This is why I had it in my mind, is because I was going to talk about it later, but I'll mention it here. Earth can get into this almost holding pattern where it keeps needing to play this card to stop itself losing. And it can just keep reclaiming because Earth has a reasonable reclaim loop. And you can just kind of keep playing and panicking, like, oh no, they're going to build like twice more in that land, and it's already got like four buildings in it. If it builds twice more, it's going to go up to 6. I can't let that build twice more. I need to keep it at 4. I'll reclaim, I'll get my skip back, I'll skip those 2 builds, and then I'll keep myself sort of at bay. And you can get into this pattern where you keep doing that, but you're not really progressing yourself towards winning the game. That's just one example, but this kind of play pattern, if you can get into that mindset of, I'm stopping myself losing, but actually you're not stopping yourself losing there. You're stopping yourself getting to 6 out of 7. Now, sometimes you're just going to have to accept that land going to 6 out of 7 because it takes too much of your effort to stop it. Here, your effort being your investment of a reclaim, your investment of 3 energy for this card, I can't remember what it's called, and your investment, generally speaking, of not getting out ahead and not starting to deal damage. Maybe you're not drafting a card to find the major you need because instead you're reclaiming, etc., etc. So this idea here of dedicate as few actions as possible to stopping yourself losing, allow yourself some risk, allow yourself maybe 5 or 10% of that event deck to kill you. Sometimes you just have to say, you know what, 10% of the time here, I just die on the event flip. And that's okay, because I'm identifying the turning point where if I allow that 10% through, 90% of the time, I'm now turning the corner, I'm stabilizing, and I'm getting ahead, and I'm pushing for the victory. So again, I probably spent 5 or 10 minutes too long on that comment, but I really loved it. I really enjoyed that. And Beta, I loved your kind of your response and your sort of different take on the same sort of thing there. So really brilliant. 1 second now. What are we? 120 here. We're going okay. Sapien 0101. It took me a while, but I've learned to love England. I pretty much only play Prussia and England these days, depending on whether I want a short or long game, which I can see being fair enough. My only quibble is indentured servants earn land, which is, if we remind ourselves, that the level 1 adjacency build. I don't like how it handicaps control spirits, and I feel like England could still function without, that rule, or with some kind of replacement for that rule. I think somebody else mentions a replacement for that rule, so I'll pick up on that point when we get to it. Someone else in one of the comments talks about what they think it could be, so I'll respond to that, this, and that at the same time when we get there. Thanks, Sapien. Now, Julian 505 comes in with a long one here, and there's some really good stuff in here too. Take a breath before I get into this. Let's maybe get a sip of water before I get into this one, Julian. Now, Julian505 says, England is also my favourite adversary before Scotland. Both are very building centric and push losses by having so much plastic on the map that you cannot wipe everything. Both also have huge fear pools and cause long games, especially England. I guess that's my type. And you and me both, Julian, because that's my exact type too. I super enjoy that you are almost forced to draft majors, even on not so much into major spirits, and adapt your usual plans. For instance, I've run a few quote unquote gauntlets where I run the same 2 or 3 spirits into every level 6 adversary a little while ago, and I found that the most unique games and unique growth patterns were with England. That means out of the 8 games I've played with every duo or trio, the England games were usually the most different from the 7 others. For instance, I tend to have less plays and more energy than usual, going extra value and trying to limit the reclaims more than usual, especially if I play a spirit that doesn't add a presence on reclaim. So again, they're talking about scaling and growth here. We talked about that during the Habsburg episode last time in terms of limit the reclaims, stretch out the reclaims, gain loads of cards, all that kind of stuff. They say here that the game starts later against England than any other adversary. The high immigration builds come into play on turn 3, which represent 3 out of the 6 levels. So again, 3 out of the 6 levels for England don't really start until the third turn of the game, which we talked about before. The other levels do not create any extra early pressure, as opposed to something like France's or the Habsburg Livestock's loss condition, for example. And you can sort of chill early game and make only very high value plays, maybe like a defend in a land with 2 to hand. During this time, you need to prepare for the monstrosity that's coming to you, as England have a very brutal mid to late game guaranteed. And you better believe you can underline and bold that word guaranteed. Their mid game is brutal and their late game is brutal. They bring inevitability, and that is awesome. Many find them unfair because of the adjacency builds and the extra HP, but I think with the correct mindset, they actually feel fair. You need to prepare a very strong high impact actions mid game with majors and big innates to win the game, and England gives you the time to do so in a fair way. Now they close out here and they say, maybe not close out, there's another page of writing here, so bear with me. I also note that games are the most varied with respect to other adversaries. Since you do need to find a way to win, as it's almost never in your base kit, that way is going to be different every time, since it depends on drafts, as opposed to, say, Lure into France 6 or Prussia 6, where he just dumps all his uniques and innates the fastest possible every time, creating similar gameplays from game to game. Which is why I hate Lure of the Deep Wilderness. I think it's boring as hell because his uniques and his innates are just great and they're just good into everything all the time. So not a fan. But anyway, we talked about that one last time. The only thing which is a little sad about England is the way they can shut down too heavily certain spirits like River, Shadows, Sunbright Whirlwind, and Wildfire, who rely on a lot of 2 damage pings, which is totally true. My solution is to not play those spirits into England, which I agree is unfun. And that's my solution too, Julian, as I say. I do think that for the rest of the roster, it's totally fine. England forces creativity, but it isn't unwinnable for the others, even if England is the worst matchup for maybe 30 to 50% of the roster. So yeah, thank you so much, Julian. Really, really good comment here. I really like this thing about the gauntlet and how you saw that the most unique games and the unique growth patterns were with England. And I completely believe that. They do function quite differently to most of their adversaries. It is true that something like maybe Scotland, maybe Habsburg Livestock, they both generally do reward you for scaling into the late game. So I think there is definitely overlaps there. But as we saw before, Habsburg is a very sort of damage-oriented spirit as well, with the kind of loss condition being a huge risk. So you can't nearly be as sort of passive and reactionary as you can maybe against England here. So I do very much believe everything you have to say there and agree with it. So thank you. Now, Gooseman is a gamer. The all Goosey boy. I think England is the adversary. Capital T, capital A. It's so iconic, and the adversary I measure all other adversaries against. I love England for its simplicity, and I fear it for its brutally simple approach. It will build everywhere, often, and just overwhelm you. It was, for good reason, the final adversary in my quest to beat all level 6 adversaries. I don't have much else to say that others have not, except I always get a little burst of adrenaline when we pull the England card out to play. And I love that. I love that. A burst of adrenaline, the little flutters, the butterflies. I'm exactly there with you, Goose, man. Every time I pull out England, it's like, oh yeah, here we go. Like, here we go. Here's a big game. I remember the first time I played England 6. I was, the butterfly it was so daunting. It was so amazing, but so much fun. And yeah, I still get that even to this day. In this Adversary Series, I was dying to play England. I couldn't wait. But I did have to put them second from last, so I couldn't put them as the actual ultimate. But anyway, that's the way it goes. Gooseman, thank you very much indeed. Nora is our last like here before we've got a couple of mixed bag opinions after the fact. And Nora, of course, as they always do, coming in with a belter. They feel tough but fair. They're another one of those adversaries whose rules all feel internally consistent and on theme, which I appreciate. And I definitely appreciate that too. I'm late enough replying that everyone else has said most of what I would say, so I'll just add this observation, which is a great one. For me, England is the adversary which has the biggest difficulty spread between physical and digital. I've said it before, I really struggle with the digital versions of the game, especially the app. Not because it's not well designed or well implemented, it is, but because when I'm not the one actually physically manipulating the pieces, it's just way too easy for me to lose track of potential threats. I'll forget about an adjacency build happening here, or fail to realize that a land is pushing the building limit there, or accidentally think that the card in the stupid build slot is instead about to ravage, so I plan my turn entirely wrong. Which is, in parentheses, a true pathetic story, and then it's a surprise game over. Whereas when all the pieces are laid out in front of me in real space, for some reason it's a lot easier for me to keep track of it all. And then finally, in parentheses, they say, and hey, not to put too fine a point on it, but on my table, I'm able to back up and redo things if I realize that I've shot the bed by missing some freely available information going into the invader phase. Whereas the app is pretty strict about not reversing past new information, which is legit, but rough for a scatterbrain like me. Nora, I just love this comment, as I always love your comments. They're always hilarious and always so insightful, and I love that you picked up on this sort of very different take with the physical and the digital realm. And I have said, of course, on the channel here multiple times, I am lost when it comes to the digital apps. I don't play them. I've never owned or installed either of the digital versions of this game, and I never will. In truth, I'm never going to bother. I don't like them. I don't like how they look. I don't like how they feel. I don't like how they play. Watching other people play them is very challenging for me. I mean, very challenging. Because I don't know the interfaces. I'm just lost half the time. And I do watch, as I talked about before, like some Kalen stuff, some Red Revenge, who else? Ryan Lackey. Is some of the watch some of the content from the Gnawing Root By. There's a whole bunch of creators that I watch some amount of their content because I like them as content creators, but I just hate the interfaces, and I can't keep up on what's going on in those games at all. It is so hard for me to visualize and to map how the game is going versus the cards they have and all that kind of stuff. I'm just lost, and I'm certain it will be true if I picked up the thing and tried to play with it myself. Now, of course, over time you might learn it, you might get used to it. Yeah, that, I know. But again, as I said, I have very little time to play this game, and I am not going to waste my precious Spirit Island time on those digital variants when I have the beautiful thing sitting on the table right in front of me. So thank you so much, Nora. Really, really enjoyed that, and yeah, totally agree. Now, that's all of our likes. Let's quickly have a sip of beer here and continue on. Protocol Skull says, this is our mixed bag now. As a Scot living in Ireland, how I feel about England is complicated. Actually, as a Scot living in Ireland, how you feel about England shouldn't be very complicated at all, Protocol. And I trust you know what I mean by that. No, I jest. From an SI point of view, England games almost always let you get to that super fun end of your spirit tracks. You get a lot of resources to deal with what it throws at you, and I love that about the adversary. However, I don't really love independent resolve, which is level 6, because I think it forces out several spirits from the selection pool. We usually play two-handed, so we need to make 10 fear per turn to avoid those double bills from the high immigration. You can make a good amount from building destruction, sure, but if at least one spirit doesn't have the fear generation via their innates or their uniques or whatever, you can often struggle to get the fear you need. It sometimes creates a fun little dance where you're holding off generating fear after you've already secured the fear card until kind of the next invader phase. But I mostly just find this rule forces me into making sure we have one of a handful of particular spirits on the team. I love that dance that you're describing, Protocol. I think it's super fun. Again, it's fiddly and it's not going to be for everybody, but I really do enjoy that, and we'll pick up on that later on. Finally, they say combine this with local autonomy, which is the level 5, that hamstrings a lot of the spirits that rely on 2 damage innates to get through the early and mid game, and you really start to cut down the number of viable choices to beat high level England. Much the same on what people were talking about earlier on. Protocol, thank you very much. Next up, Turbulent Sword 3815 says, I like that their rules are easy to remember and that you get to blow up a lot of stuff. Couldn't have put it better myself. I dislike that their special rule makes avoiding builds much harder, and the extra health on buildings punishes some spirits much harder than others. Usually my group does random setup, so they're also picking the random setup, and saying England makes some spirits just less fun. Most adversaries have a few spirits that's true for, but England feels like it has a bigger spread. They also mention here, from looking at the digital stats, I think this is supported by the data, and this is the Mind Wanderer website again that we talked about before. They say that it's supported by the data with how high the differential is for some spirits versus level 6 England, indicating a very strong difference in the matchup. So they're saying the data very much backs up what they're saying, which I totally believe. And finally, they say one rework I've seen is to make level 1 only trigger if it's adjacent to a single land with at least 2 buildings, instead of 2 buildings across all lands. Thematically, this is showing sprawl from an urban center, so it fits a bit better, and it also makes it so Explorer Control has a chance of being relevant. I haven't tried playing with it, but I'm sure it's a big difficulty decrease. So here's the comment I mentioned earlier on that I said I'd pick up on later, with the England 1 only mattering if it's 2 buildings in a single land. I like this idea, I do have to say. Thematically, I agree, it makes a lot of sense. How big of a difficulty change would this be? I think in the early game, this would be a huge difference. It feels like it will be significantly easier in the early game. In the later game, this would matter much less. In the later game against England, once the ball starts rolling, once you basically get through your kind of, once you get onto your kind of level, not level, your let's say episode here, your turn 3, turn 4, once those high immigrations start to get going, you're gonna come across a lot of lands with at least 2 buildings, and this would be essentially, it would play the exact same. Where I think this would make the difference, as I say, is those first kind of 2, maybe 3 turns where you would get that opportunity I talked about earlier, where most of your buildings are on the coast. You've got one building somewhere in there in the inland around about your land 7, land 8, maybe land 6. If you can get that out of there, or maybe isolate that land, maybe push an explorer, or maybe even you don't even need to isolate that one land anymore because it's only got one building, so it won't count. So I think there, for those first couple of turns, I think this really makes a big difference for those kind of strategies, and your push one explorer effects will become significantly better against England. So overall, it feels to me that that might be about a point of difficulty lower. It might be about a diff 10 as opposed to a diff 11, just instinctively. Personally, it wouldn't be my choice of play, because I love the difficulty that comes from that particular ability. But again, like I said, that's just me. But I do agree that will probably give a lot more spirits, a lot more play into this adversary. So a nice idea. Now, Quarry 87, we've only got one or two more, I think maybe three left here, so we're nearly done. England 4 is the best designed adversary in the game, and I will die on that hill. Unfortunately, once you move to level 5, it starts being unfair to several spirits and loses some points. Level 6 is actually fine, on the other hand. Some fix to level 5 would actually solve the issue I have with England and probably push it above Scotland in my adversary tier list. I've heard this a lot. England is perfectly designed up until level 4, and then it just falls off a cliff for some people. It should be worth noting as well that England 5 and England 6 are both worth 2 points of difficulty each. So it goes from 7 to 9 to 11, at least with that updated sort of, again, errata kind of version. So they say here level 6 is actually fine. Well, the creators would say otherwise. They'd say that's 2 points of difficulty, and I would tend to believe it. But yeah, they say some fix to level 5 here. I'm trying to remember, did anybody else? I don't think anybody else made a suggestion around a fix to level 5. Making it conditional somehow, similar to what you have with Habsburg. You know, they get +1. They get +1 health if they're adjacent to 2 buildings, or some sort of adjacency. If you somehow increase or introduce some kind of adjacency rule for their health as well as their building, that could be an on-team way to kind of go ahead and solve some of that. Maybe it's they get +1 health as long as there's a number of buildings, a low number of buildings. So they're harder to kill when there's up to 3 buildings or 4. Once it goes above 4, then they lose the +1 health. Now, how you do that thematically and why that would happen thematically, I'm not sure. Why they get bigger and stronger and all of a sudden they get weaker. You'd need to find some sort of way of talking about, the sprawl has somehow weakened them because they're less consolidated. I'm not sure. I'm spitballing things. I didn't think of any of this in advance. This is totally on the spot here, but I feel like I just came up with some pretty good ideas there on the spot, I have to say. Slightly proud of myself for that. But anyway, that could be some ways to fix level 5 here. Like I said, personally, don't necessarily feel like it has to be done, but now that I say those out loud, they're absolutely fantastic ideas, and somebody should go ahead and get some exploratory version of England up there and let us start to play test with it. Now, Symphony 7 is almost closing out here, but we have another beast of a comment here from Symphony, but I had to keep it in because it's also very good. Symphony 7 says, I have a serious love-hate relationship with England. I really like how the high immigration adds a powerful new layer to the Ravage Build Explore cycle, and it requires evaluating threats in a completely novel way that no other adversary does. Combine the extra build with their adjacency builds, and it makes for an extremely sticky adversary that is hard to shut out. I still think of them as the final boss of Spirit Island, even if Russia is comparable in difficulty. I also really like how the games can go long, but give you some space to breathe and build up at the start. You get to bring your spirit at full power, but they are strong enough to demand that you do so if you want to stand a chance, and it really feels like a clash of the titans. Their strength is unfortunately their weakness too. The extra health on buildings and their resistance to control through adjacency build and their loss condition is a very cool and unique dynamic, but it sadly almost completely invalidates quite a few spirits, and they also mention River, Wildfire, Heat and Sunbright Whirlwind, to name a few. They stand almost no chance beyond YOLOing for a major that they can hope to spam to win. I don't mind spirits having hard matchups at all, but England more than anyone else feels like some just need to be left in the box. And as far as strong spirits, what you are looking for is consistent fear generation and high damage or quote-unquote destroy effects. Defense can be okay, but England lands build up so heavily that it can be an uphill battle for you. Control is much worse than normal, and I actually think blight removal is at its best here, and I think they're the only one who mentioned this. No matter how bad an England land gets, it's just ravaging for 1 blight, and England doesn't get any special bonuses from blight, never adds any extra, and doesn't add any extra bonus ravages. So because of that, having a land or two that you let get bad where you just keep blight removing after they ravage is really strong. So very nice point, Symphony. And they also here have a little bit of a breakdown of some of the spirits, and I am not going to do my own spirit breakdown later, so I was very happy to keep these in when they did. So taking all this into account, some spirits I find do very well into England are Keeper. Keeper trades a bit of a slow start for a massive power spike, a curve that perfectly mirrors England. As soon as England gets scary, you're ready to start slinging majors and you can easily overpower them. And of course, they're probably there referring to the famous sort of G4 builds with Keeper, where they generate a lot of energy and they get the kind of double presence placement. So their early game is very much a kind of a slow, bit of a ponderous start, and then they go bam, 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 get a number of double presence placement, and they can really scale into some pretty powerful stuff. Now, top track Fangs. So these are two spirits that were mentioned earlier on by, I can't remember who it was, but here they are picking up on Keeper and Fangs again. Fangs easily clears the fear hurdle to avoid the double high immigration, and with a strong energy spike growth, top track will let you dig for your huge bomb mages like sea monsters or insatiable hunger of the swarm. Lure. Lure makes a solid amount of fear and packs an extremely strong punch to knock down those nasty England lands, and the downgrades are phenomenal for turning off the extra health, which is a great shout. That was also really good against Habsburg too, as I found. Fractured Days. While nothing inherently built into his kit is great into England, your incredible support, massive energy spike, and ability to pick and choose high-value majors, you almost always find something you can hammer for a win. Fractured Solo versus England 6 is my personal record for highest scoring game, with a turn 3 fast phase terror level 1 victory for 102 points, which sounds insane. I almost won terror level 1 against England 6 with Fractured Days, where I had Bargains of Power and Protection, the one that gives you the defend, in my Days That Never Were pile with Fractured Days, and it's completely and utterly insane on that spirit. It was broken as hell. I just played that I think twice, and all I did then was just reclaim the one that just prints the hand, pushes the hand everywhere, and I just printed and pushed a bunch of the hand all over the whole board every turn. I just reclaimed loop that, and it was the most broken thing in the world. They all just killed themselves. I just generated one fear too many, and I just pushed myself into terror level 2. I won so easily, wiped every single invader, but I got one fear too many for it to be terror level 1. Anyway, I digress. Wounded Waters. Like with Keeper, your early weak turns are matched with England's weak early turns. Your blue cards giving you so many downgrades is very strong into England, and your unmatched blight control allows you to just not care about your build-up lands ravaging. And finally, Downpour. Isolate is extremely good due to turning off adjacency builds, and your ability to damage all buildings in a land is superb here. With the right drafts, your fear generations will be great as well. Finally, they say, overall, I put England middle of the pack for how much I enjoy it, with most of the negative feelings coming from how hard it counters too many spirits, but it will always have a special place in my heart as the ultimate big bad of the game. Thank you very much, Symphony 7 here. Really, really nice. Short one here from Damuel. I dislike that some spirits are very weak to them, but that's part of the spirit. Pure damage dealers who can't easily reach for majors will struggle a bit, but I do like the way it changes the game, as those are my favorite types of adversaries. And I do believe here I have 2 more left. Beta Jin has another fantastic one. They came in with a response earlier, and they've got another brilliant one here. They say, I think, as you say, it's a bit of a you love it or you hate it Marmite type of adversary. It's very clear what it's all about, and if you like that, you like it, and if you don't, you don't. I personally find it can lead to some thrilling games, but I'm also often not in the mood to play such a drawn-out encounter. Maybe one slightly original bit of info I can add is this chart depicting the terror level at victory of level 6 adversaries, and this is again drawn from that Mind Wanderers digital stats here. So I'm going to bring this up on the screen right now because it's a super cool chart that Beta found, and it basically shows that England, and this is terror level victory, so these are all won games against all level 6 adversaries. Clearly, England is much more prone to terror level 4 victories than any other adversary. And actually, also, funny enough, they're also most prone to terror 1 as well. So for those of you who cannot see this chart, it's basically showing of the 6 adversaries that are available in the digital app, which are Brandenburg, Prussia, England, Sweden, France, Habsburg, and Russia. It shows how each from all the four win conditions, the four tier level win stages, kind of for each one where those wins lie. And England is a massive outlier. All of the rest are somewhat even, where they have very, very little in tier level 1, and then, you know, smallish on tier level 4, and then the 2 and the 3 somewhat split in the middle. England is wildly different to all of the rest. Over half of the victories against England have come at tier level 4, which is way significantly more. None of the rest even have 25%, and England has over half. So by far the way you win most of all against England is that tier level 4. But also, funny enough, they're also the ones with the most amount of a percentage of the tier level 1 as well, which is quite funny. But they finally close out and say, I think that when one's mindset changes from trying to beat England like any other adversary to, I'm going to slug it out, survive and scale, and eventually probably make enough fear, it becomes a much more approachable adversary. And obviously that's not the only approach, but I think it's a pretty decent baseline for beating England 6. Thank you, Beta Gin. Really, really good as always. I loved that. Nice little thing there, and hugely insightful actually. To see how England sort of how you need to think about the potential for victory against them. So I will refer to that a little bit later on again. Finally, very last comment here, short and sweet. Mekatar says, one day I will win a game against England that isn't my husband's bringer dreams and nightmares, hitting 60 plus fear and burning up the whole fear deck. But today is not that day. Very good, Megadar. Thank you very much. And everybody, that is the end of the comments. We did a good hour, a solid hour, more than an hour maybe on the comments there. I did say it was going to be a long one, a bit drawn out of an affair. I talked plenty around everything that everyone had to say there, but it was hugely appreciated. Fantastic, as always. I love hearing all your inputs, and there's so many interesting, unique, and insightful things to hear from. So, again, massive thanks. So let's take a breath. You can hear I'm out of breath here. I will say this much. I will be honest. As bad as that beer is, hasn't this improved as badly as I thought it would. Now, maybe that's because it sat in the ice bath for so long, and I poured a second glass of it, but that wasn't an open bottle, and it hasn't disimproved as much as I figured it would. It's not undrinkable. Or shall I put it this way? It's about as undrinkable now as it was when I opened the bottle first. And that is probably the strongest compliment I can possibly give to that beer, which I will admit is not a very good compliment. But it's something. Now, that's all that. Now I'm going to break this down. And of course, I've done a lot of the breaking down already, which I like to do as part of the community inputs here. So this whole section here, I'm going to get in. We're going to look at, as I say, we'll take a bit of a how they beat us look here. I'll simplify it, and we'll look at kind of 3 or 4 different kind of key rules and things that you can keep in mind. Then we'll look at the loss condition and how we lose. Not the loss condition itself, but how we lose. Then we'll go ahead and we'll look at the kind of strategies and tactics here. So we'll see how all this goes. We're 150 now, so again we're going a little bit long here. But you know we're hopefully enjoying ourselves. I'm enjoying myself. Hopefully you're enjoying myself. Maybe you haven't heard any of this and you've skipped right to the end, or skipped to try find where the giveaway is. And if that's the case, well no, listen. As I say, fair play. That's okay. I won't hold that against you. But anyway, how do they beat us? Let's have a look. Now, they have kind of 3 angles of attack here, right? 3 key angles of attack. The first thing that they do, these aren't necessarily in any particular order here, but just the 3 sort of key things. First thing they do is they can't be kept at bay. They essentially counter our prevention tactics. We heard about this all in the episode, so I won't belay the point here. They just keep adding buildings. It's like a tower defense game. And I know there is a kind of an actual tower defense mode as one of the scenarios in the game, but for me, England feel like tower defense. They just keep building buildings. You just cannot stop them. And try as I might in my playthrough, my playthrough was like about as much prevention as you can possibly manage against England, and they still broke through, which is not surprising because they have um, they have mechanisms built in that will counter your prevention. Of course, the adjacency build counters your prevention because it means you have to get the explorer out of there, and then you also have to either isolate the land or somehow pocket the land and get all the buildings away from it. So there's like all these extra steps that you need to take. Whereas against many other adversaries, you just push the explorer out and you're done. So of course that's a kind of a mechanism to prevent that. But another mechanism that they have to counter your prevention is their escalation. And of course the high immigration, because once you stop one build, it's going to tick down the invader sort of actions, and then it's going to just build again. So there's extra modes of forcing through. And the thing about the escalation is, no matter how well you do at preventing builds across your whole board, you can like stop everything in like 7 of your 8 lands. And by the way, stopping everything in 7 out of your 8 lands is basically unheard of. It's extremely challenging, and it's basically what I did in my game. Very difficult. It requires massive attention to detail to make sure that it doesn't happen, as well as, of course, all these isolates. But even when you do that, they still have a way to beat you, because their escalation will keep happening and it'll keep targeting the same land. So you'll start with 2, then it'll go to 3, then it'll go to 4. And you're putting all of this effort to stop the rest of your board from anything from happening. And they have this mechanism in the background that either 3 or 4 times, depending on whether you hit coastal or not, it is going to keep targeting that one land, and you will lose to the land. Because also in the meantime, of course, you've gone through 3 stage 1 cards and 4 stage 2 cards, so it will hit that land. And if you're focusing all your attention on the rest of your board, you're not going to be able to stop that land. Like, you're not going to clear the land. You might be able to ravage skip, or maybe you just take a blight and you forget about it and you go about your business, but you won't be clearing the plastic out of it. So, because you're too busy on all the other lands, you can't deal with everything. So as a result, if you do this kind of prevention tactics, which is to prevent everything on your board, at minimum, there will be one land that just keeps building and building and building, and you will lose the game, no matter how clear the rest of your board is. So it's very challenging. No matter what you do, they will stop your prevention and they will break through eventually. That's the first thing. The second thing is they make it hard to recover. So, sort of no matter what your game looks like, as I say, even in the cleanest of boards, there will be a mess in at least one land. Oftentimes, there's just a mess all over your board, which is a lot of the times how the games against England go. They just build everywhere, there's plastic everywhere. The problem here is, with those problem lands especially threatening the loss condition, so similar to what I talked about before, the escalations are coming, you can't stop them. The problem lands have to be stopped. Your skips are stretched. You might skip the Ravage, maybe even skip a couple of builds, but it will keep coming back for more. And the problem here especially as well happens where a lot of the time in this game, your goal, I think I said this also in the Habsburg Livestock episode, you really are trying to line your actions with lands that are active. To optimize, right? If you've got a big nuke, right? I've got a one land nuke. What's a one land nuke? There's that card that came out in Nature Incarnate that removes everything in the land. It's a terrible card. I've never cast it, but there is a card that does that. One land removes everything in the one land. Forget what it's called. I can bring it up on screen here if I think of it. It's the fragments of yesteryear, I think you call it. There could come a time in the game where you have to play Fragments of Yesteryear on that problem land because it's about to kill you. Very often, that problem land will not be an active land. And by active land here, I mean, of course, a land that's maybe about to ravage or it's maybe about to build. Against England, a lot of times your problem lands are non-active lands because they're the ones that are threatening the loss condition with the upcoming escalation. And if you have to start aligning your cards and big plays to non-active lands, you are not lining up your actions with the place where the invaders are attacking you. So it means you're taking extra ravages or whatever, or extra builds. And that's one problem with England here, is it can be very hard to get back in the game. Like if you start to fall behind and you start to get into those kind of play patterns, it's so hard to recover because you aren't aligning your actions with those active lands. So that's one big thing that I think England does more than basically any other adversary, is when you fall behind and that sort of thing starts happening, you're really you're really up against it. And that's not to mention, of course, the other really big problem with recovery here is they counter your removal. So, okay, Fragments of Yesteryear says remove everything in land. That's fine. But what about if you're trying to do it with a big damage card? You know, their extra health really significantly weakens many of those quote unquote big plays that I'm talking about. I had to think of one off the top of my head that can just wipe any land no matter what. Of course, there are others, but not many. A lot of the time, you're trying to do like a bunch of damage. There's a bunch of 4-cost majors in there that I was looking through earlier on. There's a handful of them there that's like 4 damage if you have the threshold, an extra 5 damage or something like that. There's like literally about 8 cards that are borderline unplayable that do a similar thing. I'll bring one of them up on screen now. I can't even think of any of them. Those cards are so much weaker into England than they are under normal circumstances. Like against most other adversaries, if you have to, you take one of those cards and you just clear a land and you call it a day. Against England, you take one of them, it's like 9 damage. Okay, it's like I killed like 3 of the 5 buildings and I still didn't solve the land, and then it's going to ravage next turn or whatever. So those extra plus health really counter your removal, and they really limit those big plays that everybody talked about as part of the episode. So they make it very hard. Again, if you're falling behind, you're really struggling, you're scrambling, you're trying to find a major to just get you back in the game and stop the rot and stop the mess. A lot of the time, they counter some of the things that you can find. That's the second thing they do. The third thing that England do is their invader deck order can destroy you. A few people mentioned this, and we'll go into the detail just a slight bit more here, but we've more or less covered it. Back-to-backs, right? Back-to-backs, we've heard a bunch of adversaries, things like Brandenburg, Prussia, are probably the biggest offenders of it, but Sweden are bad as well. There's a handful of them where if you get back-to-backs early, you can just get completely swept away because of those kind of ravages. Against England, the back-to-back functions a little bit differently, or it hurts you very badly for a slightly different reason. Here, it's less about the ravage intensity and the extra blight and all of that, and it's more about, well, first of all, when you get a back-to-back, what does it do? Well, think about it. As your cards slide down the sort of the invader spaces, you're going to get in this situation where you have high immigration. Let's say there's a back-to-back. High immigration in wetlands, and then ravage in wetlands. You're going to now have this problem where even if on the previous turn you cleared that wetland out, now you're going to run into the problems of adjacency build first. If I haven't isolated the land or whatever, it goes build in the land that was empty a second ago, build in there, and then ravage. So it causes all these kind of problems from the kind of back-to-back perspective. But not only that, against England, it's not only the back-to-backs that you have to worry about. That's only one part of the problem. And if that was it, you might be able to get away with it. Your defend would do a pretty good job in that spot. But almost arguably worse than the back-to-back England against England is the back to almost back, the back to in the middle bit, where you go back to no to back. I should have come up with a name for this before I did this segment. I don't know what to call it, but this idea of let's go again, wetlands in your high immigration spot, then anything else, then a jungle, for example, and then a wetlands in your build spot. Now you end up in this situation where you go wetlands builds, jungles ravages, wetlands builds again, and now you hit your escalation. And because you just built twice in a wetland, there's a very strong chance that your wetland is one of those wetlands is the land on the board with the most invaders in it, or the most buildings in it, and now it's going to build in there again when you hit your escalation. And God forbid you didn't have a fear card resolve this turn because you high immigration double build first, and then you build, and then you built again. So that's like there's a frequent it's a non-rare situation to have that spot in the game where you can have 4 builds in one single land on a given turn, and it's horrific when it happens. And God forbid you hit an edge case in there and you had something in there that did a build or added a town or something into that land. You can realistically, it is feasible to go from 2 buildings in a land to 7 in one single cycle of event plus invader cards, which is just horrendous. So if you get the wrong order in them, that can be brutal. So they're, for me, the 3 ways that they hurt you. Now let's talk about how we lose. So that's the kind of how they, let's say, how they attack us. Now we'll talk about how we actually lose the game. Again, I've got kind of 3 things here. Did it last time out when we talked about Habsburg, and I said there were sort of 3 about on par, about level in terms of frequency of how likely you are to lose to any of those ways. And I've done the same thing again here with England. For me, there are sort of 3 ways you lose to England. I would say that these 3 are all level when it comes to playing at level 6. If you're playing below level 6, I think you're probably talking about one of these being more prevalent than the other. But we'll get into them, we'll talk about it. As I say, if you're playing level 6, these are for me all about the same. First thing is the actual loss condition. 7 lands, 7 buildings in a land, you've lost the game. Very difficult. It absolutely comes up. They can get you with their loss condition. It might be, is it the adversary that probably you lose to the loss condition most? No, I'd say probably France and maybe even Habsburg livestock more than England, but England is still very feasible. Far more likely than Scotland, for example, and far more likely than Russia, which we'll talk about next time. More likely than HME as well. So England was probably in the top half, I would say. But you've got actually losing to it. But then you've got, so actually losing to it will very often also be caused by the edge case. We've heard that from people in the episode, and we sort of know that with other loss conditions as well, is you get hit by an edge case. Something came up that you didn't anticipate, and that's what got you. But here, it's worth bearing in mind that not only can the loss condition get you, the threat of the loss condition can completely train wreck your game. I talked about a little bit earlier on with this idea of reclaim looping with Earth to try stop yourself losing the game. You can get into modes of panic where you start panic drafting or you panic reclaim or you basically throw off what was a game plan and a strategy because you have fear of losing to the thing. So there will of course be turns where you're looking at the board, you go, I have to panic draft, I'll look for something, try find a fast card, see can I solve it. That's just going to happen, right? And there are times when you have to panic draft because you are dead on board. But there are other games where you start making panic decisions that you aren't necessarily dead on board. What I talked about earlier on, where you maybe allow a 10 or even 20% chance to lose. Maybe even you look at it and you go, I've got 1 stage 2 card left. If it's coastal, I'm safe. If it's jungles or whatever the other one is, I die. And sometimes you might need to take a 50-50 because the alternative is just going to lose you the game anyway. Now, very often you're not going to take a 50-50 shot to lose the game. There's going to be very few situations where you don't take the other alternative, which might be reclaiming or something else. But that's the type of thing I'm talking about here. So the threat of it can actually kill your game almost before the loss condition itself does. Now, next is not managing your fear is the next way that you lose. And this again, I think, is mostly related to when you're playing at level 6, because here I'm talking about the importance of that high immigration, the double high immigration with level 6. I would say, if I had to guess, totally off the top of my head, this is not based on data or anything else. My instinct here is that your average game against England with your average adversary, with your average spirit or spirit teams, you can probably survive 1 double high immigration build on average. Usually, very often, that will look like the first one or the second one, and no more after that. Sometimes you just won't have it lined up where you have a fear card on time, or maybe you accidentally gain too much for the first one, so you got the first one okay, but then you went slightly over, and then, or maybe an event pushed you over or something, and now you don't have enough fear for the second one. That's where you'll usually take your double high immigration build. Will be either the turn 3, which is where it happens first, or the turn 4, where it happens second. Most games, as they say on average, you can probably afford 1, not more than 1. I would venture and I would guess that if you had to look at the data, any game that you take the double high immigration twice or more, you'll lose. It's just too many buildings. It's too much on the board. It's too many actions for the invaders to take. Once, okay. More than once, not okay. That's the difference to me between a win and a loss. And the other thing here I would say, so again, it's not just about volume of fear. That's the key as well here. I didn't say necessarily just raw fear gain. We're talking about management of fear here, and that's really important. Knowing when you're taking your fear. You saw me do this in my game when I played with Shroud, because you've got that fast fear card that gains 2 fear. I was watching and I was thinking, okay, am I playing this turn? Actually, no, I don't need the fast 2 fear this turn. I'm going to keep this card in my hand. I'm going to play a different card. I'll gain some slow fear with this card, and the next turn I have the fast fear to get me up to the fear card, to get me to make sure that I'm managing my fear total. Now, that won't always be very easy to do. You very often will not have that much agency in it, but there'll usually be some. And you just need to watch that and be careful about it when you're drafting, when you're picking up your fear cards, when you're applying them, when you're using them, all that kind of stuff. So be very careful about your management of gaining fear as well as the raw gain. And something else also just to mention here as well, you should assume, based on what we saw from Beta Jin, you will need, every game you go into England, you should just assume that you're going to need to get to the Terror level 4 victory. Then adjust accordingly. So start your game thinking, how do I build a plan that's going to get me to that late game, generate me enough fear, get me over the line, and win that way, as opposed to clearing the requisite type of plastic for each of the other terror levels. Now that's not to say that you won't do the other terror level wins. Stage 3 is a reasonably frequent one, but you have to find that out later in the game. You can't plan for that early because they're just too much variance in how the game goes. So that's something you should take in mind, and of course, accordingly, generally take fear cards when you think you can fit them in your kit. Now, that's the second level. That's the second way you lose. The third way you lose is not scaling into a win condition. This one for me is the one that if you're not playing against level 6 and you're playing against almost any of the other levels, this is how you lose. Generally, this looks like you cannot meet the demands of the late game. There's plastic everywhere, right? And we've talked about that on previous episodes. Let's call this a regular loss. Stuff everywhere, you just can't keep up. Getting overwhelmed with the kind of back-to-backs that we talked about before, the builds, the ravages, all that kind of stuff. And here again, getting caught up in prevention is a trap. Talk about this when I get to my strategies and tactics section here, but for me, this kind of falls under this. Is you played a game where you got too caught up in trying to prevent what England were doing, and you did not focus enough on scaling yourself and dealing with the problems that will happen later in the game, inevitably. You got too caught up in it, you did too much prevention, you were trying too hard to isolate and prevent builds, and in doing so, you did not give yourself the cards, the drafts, the growths, the scaling to get to that late game and beat them in the late game. So that is for me the risk, and that's the trap that I'll pick up on later on. Now, that is all of how they beat us. Let us again have a moment of reprieve. This is the mid game. We're about to get to the late game against England here. We're getting there, guys, but we're 2 minutes and 11. It's a long enough episode again. This feels a bit like playing against England. I'm not going to lie. It's grueling. It's hard work. The lights are on me. The spotlight's on me. Whew. I need to breathe. Now, I did say that we're going to do deep dives into majors. How deep I dive, it's going to depend on the time. Probably not as deep as I thought, given that we're 2 minutes and 11 now, but that is quite okay. How do we beat them? Strategies, tactics, the whole lot. It's all going to get merged in together. There are going to be some overlaps with the Habsburg Livestock episode. Some of the stuff we'll talk about worked over there, and I'll be able to skip through some of that, but we'll see how much. Given that they function similarly, there's a lot of stuff about buildings, you'd assume that these would overlap very clearly, but we'll see. Maybe not quite so much. Now, we've got this very good to very bad stuff here. Again, very good is going to be a whole bunch of stuff here that we talk about in terms of very good, and I've got a handful of stuff here that doesn't work so well into England. The majors is a big part of all of this, so I'm starting there. It's actually technically not the most important thing. I wouldn't say that drafting majors is the most important thing to do in England. The actual most important thing I'll talk about in a moment after this, but I wanted to put it up front because on each of the other little sections, let's say, I will give some examples of majors. as we go through to give an idea about what I'm talking about. So I'm going to start with the majors first, because this is this little deep dive thing I was talking about here. So what I'm calling this is kind of building an end game, which very often looks like drafting majors. Now, what am I going to do here? I'm going to give just 3 rules of thumb, golden rules, right? Three is the key number. When I've done online education and different things like that before, adult education before, 3 is the key number when you're teaching people things, when you're learning things, when you're internalizing things, when you're planning things. 3 is the key number. So these are the 3 key things to keep in mind when you want to draft majors. If you want to improve at drafting majors, if you feel like I said earlier on, I see this a lot in the community, people saying, I don't know how to play with majors. When do I get them? I always get them too late, this kind of stuff. These are the 3 keys to keep in mind. First, recognize when your game state is trending towards a state that will require major power effects to solve. Do not wait until you get there. How do you do this? You have to find a way to map your effects to the invader's progression and ask yourself the question, can you keep up? This can be as early as turn 1 in the game. It often should be as early as turn 1 in the game. I spoke about this earlier in the episode. When I sit down, first thing I'm doing before I take any actions is I'm talking. Well, obviously I'm on camera, so I'm doing a lot of talking about it, but this should be part of your wheelhouse here, is thinking about your spirit's kit. What are your tools that you have to combat this adversary? I'm not going to belabor the point because I said it earlier on in the thing, but this is the same sort of mindset. And here, what we're talking about is not necessarily just on the first turn. It can be as early, and it should be as early the first turn, but you're always in a game trying to identify and map your effects and your progression that you are building, your plan that you're building. Every turn is a plan. It's a part of a bigger picture. There's a whole idea of tactics and strategies. A turn is a tactic within an overall comprehensive strategy. You have a plan. Where am I going? Am I going top track? Am I going bottom track? Am I unlocking this innate? Is my innate enough to win this game? If I get there, will that take care of what England are doing? Yes, no. Do my uniques work? Am I lured the deep wilderness? Do all I need to do is just reclaim, loot my uniques and my innates, and that'll be good enough the vast majority of the time? Or am I Shroud of Silent Mist, where I have to build towards something? I need to get to that late game with many card plays so I can start leveling up those innates and then eventually kill a town against England or something like that. But you get the idea here. But the point here is that you have to recognize the point in the game. You need to recognize, not necessarily a point, you need to recognize when the game itself is trending towards a state that your current kit and progression cannot keep up with. Recognizing that is the first step. Not waiting until you get there. Recognizing that it's happening. It's already starting to happen. Was I trying to contain them early? Did I try to do this prevention stuff and they slip through the net? Yes, no, all this kind of thing. Am I keeping up on time? Did I have enough? Did I go the wrong track? Did I go top track accidentally and actually I needed to go bottom track? All these kind of things. Is the game starting to slip away? Don't wait 2-3 turns. You know what England are going to do. You know that they're going to keep adding plastic. You know the high immigration is going to happen. Are you falling behind on fear? Are you lagging on fear? Is your fear machine and engine not getting online quick enough? They're going to start double building on the high immigration. These are the kind of things that you have to identify 1, 2, 3 turns early. And then that's the trigger where you go, okay, hang on a second. I'm going to need a major here. That's step 1. Step 2 is visualize a path to your major turn and do that several turns in advance. So knowing when the major will happen, or when it needs to happen, that's going to give you significantly more control over how it happens. Things like doing your growth options in the correct order versus the wrong order, it can yield much different results. So again, similarly to step 1, where it's talking about I'm identifying that the game is starting to get away from me and I'm identifying that a few turns in advance. Here it's I'm visualizing the path to the turn when I play the major. And I'm doing it now 1, 2, 3 turns in advance. So I can start to map it out. Okay, when am I getting the major? Well, what am I doing now? I'm going to G2 now. I'm going to go bottom. I'm going to unlock, double placement. I'm going to unlock an extra card play. I'll play these 2 cards. Okay, following turn, I'll G2 again, 2 more off top. That'll give me enough energy to play the other 2 cards in my hand. That'll give me 2 G2s. That'll kind of get my engine a bit more unlocked. I haven't gained any cards there, but it's given me the kind of economy that I can get to maybe my 3-3-3 that we've heard about before, right? 3 energy, 3 plays. Maybe that gets me there over 2 turns. Then I reclaim, and then on the reclaim, I have a card growth option, and that's when I gain my major, and that's when I'll have enough energy banked, and then I'll play it. See what I mean? It's like it's 3 turns in advance. So you're thinking about like where's the card gain growth where you're actually picking the major. What card are you forgetting? Are you happy enough to throw away one of your uniques? Maybe you haven't gained a minor yet in the game. You don't have a forget father. Do you just throw away one of your uniques? Is that okay? Or do I need to do a card gain first to gain something I'm happy to throw away and then gain a major? Those kind of things. Do I have the energy income? Do I need to go top track a couple times first? That sort of G2 example I gave you before. Maybe you reverse it. Maybe you go G2 top, pull 2 off top, go to my energy spot, get up to 3 energy first. Do that like 2 turns in advance so that now my energy is rolling and I've got enough of an energy bankroll so that I can afford a major that's going to cost maybe 4, 5, 6. So you're not getting to the key turn and then going, I've only got 3 energy here. You massively limit yourself. Do I need support? Are there support spirits on my team? Is lightning on my team? Do I need to line up my my major turn with lightning's boon so that gives me access to all the slow mages in the deck? Shifting memory of ages, elemental teachings, critical for my major turn so that they can help me uh, threshold my major. All these kind of things. So again, you're not just waiting, you're planning, you're knowing, you're telling your team, okay, I'm doing this, then I'm doing this. Then the 3rd turn from now is when I'm going there. That's what I'm doing. I'll get back to you later when I know which support cards I need, but I'm telling you in advance. So visualize the path to the major turn. Finally, and it's a little bit lined up with what I just said there, but I want to make this explicitly clear. Don't wait until you have enough energy. Almost any spirit in this game can realistically play any major. It won't be easy. And yes, Shroud of Silent Mist and several others have very poor energy economy for the most part. But generally, you can make it work. And sometimes, and England is very often the case, you have to get creative. If you're always waiting until you've got that 3 or 4 spare energy, or you've reached the 3-3 that I talked about with the 3 energy and the 3 card plays, if you're always waiting until you get there before you go and look for the major, you're going to find yourself playing a really significantly more reactive major style instead of proactive. And that is the key that I hear people talking about all the time. And actually, when people ask the question online, when do you gain a major? When's the trigger? When's the kind of, the signal? A lot of people will say, oh, when I reach 3-3, or when I've got 3 or 4 energy banked. No, I'm sorry, but no, that is not when you gain a major power. Maybe it's the turn, the specific turn when you actually press the major power button, but you have to know that your game is trending that way 1, 2, 3 turns before. And very often it's a much better idea to actually gain the major power 1, 2, 3 turns before you play it. Do not wait until the turn when you'll have the economy available to press the major draft button. If you can, do it 1 or 2 or 3 turns before so that you have the card drafted. You have it in your hand. You know what the card is. You have it ready lined up for maybe next turn, maybe the following turn. And that will, as I say, help you plan out the support that you need. You'll know which energy spiking option you might need. If you're shifting memory, maybe I know I now need to press my +9 button because I found a draw towards a consuming void. I didn't wait until the turn I needed to play the major and then look for it because now I can't afford draw anymore. That would have been the perfect card, but now I can't afford it. gain it a turn or two earlier so you know what the card is and you know when to play it. And that will help you so much more to plan your game, map your game and your growth patterns and your play patterns, and the map all of that to the invader progression and their tempo and how they're acting, and you will find you are much more likely to get the timing right so that you can get your big nuke, you can get your rumbling earthquakes, and you can hit at the exact right time instead of waiting till the last second and doing so in a reactive way. So now that is that little section there. Hopefully that made some sense. And hopefully people, maybe there might be one or two things in there. I mean, some of that stuff is maybe, old hat, is that the phrase? Or some of that stuff might be maybe obvious to some people. I appreciate that. But maybe not so much for others. And hopefully there's a little nugget or two to maybe help you if you're struggling a bit with England, or maybe struggling a bit with major powers. So that's the little guidelines there. Now we're going to do the very good to very bad stuff. We're going to go through all of it here, and I'll do this a little bit quickly. I'm not going to go through, and I'm not going to stop and talk about every major. I've got a number listed on kind of each section, as I say. I might talk about one or two in each section as opposed to all of them. So we'll go through and we look. The very most important thing you can do against England, this is very much on the very good scale, and it's actually the most important thing. We've heard everyone mention it. It's scale your spirits. And I talked about this in the Habsburg episode, where I talked about take blight to scale, your growth and your play patterns to stretch out reclaims, don't go chasing solutions early, all that kind of stuff. So we talked about that in Habsburg. I'm not going to go through it here. You have to build for the late game. Build your engines, build your support powers, your support networks, build your big hammers and all that kind of stuff. I do have a number of cards here which are more on the support side. These are some of the more kind of engine-y type cards here that we talk about when we talk about scaling and kind of enabling your spirit here. So I'll mention them all and maybe stop and look at one or two. You've got Transformative Sacrifice, Entwined Power, Power Storm, Unrelenting Growth, Unlock the Gates of Deepest Power, and Dream of the Untouched Land. They're all your kind of best, and some of them are extremely powerful here. I mean, Unrelenting Growth is an example. It's a windmill slam against England. If you can find that on the first couple of turns, it's just incredible. It accelerates you to your end game. Don't worry about the big windmill slam, big hitter that's going to deal a million damage. Take the Unrelenting Growth, use that to fuel the late game, and then go and find your major after the fact here. So very, very strong. But like a lot of these are just kind of engine cards. Entwined Power, you're giving each other energy, you're giving each other card drafts, you're doing all that kind of stuff. Like Power Storm, do I need to talk about Power Storm? No, of course not. Dream of the Untouched Land, this is the matchup first. This is the adversary where that card is at its absolute best here. If you can threshold that thing, it's going to be lights out, because it's going to accelerate you by 2, gets you the 2 presence placement, and of course then it starts skipping actions and everything from England. So that is absolutely S tier. Now, after that comes the big damage and the big destruction cards. Again, everybody's kind of talked about it here, and a lot of these are probably quite obvious, but we're going to start with a minor power in this case, and we're going to mention Drought, because I have said before that Drought is a major power in the minor power deck. So I love Drought, and it of course does big work into England here, albeit at the cost of a blight. But fantastic. But you've got a lot of them. The Jungle Hungers is a kind of a major version of Drought. Unearth the Beast of Wrathful Stone. I mentioned earlier on about this thing of acting in inactive lands. Sometimes that just might matter, and you might need something like an Unearth the Beast to just deal a big load of damage. Rumbling Earthquakes is the MVP. It was the MVP against Habsburg livestock, and it's absolutely the MVP. This is lights out. It's a killer blow against England, and if you can find this card, you tell the whole team that you found it, and everybody starts pointing support at you to get that online and reclaim Lubas and get England killed and dead. But of course, you've got the other big hitters there. The Volcanic Eruption is the one that I found in my playthrough, and it did huge work to wipe out lands. So really, really strong. It's funny, 20 damage. It was like just about kill this land. Like killed 6 invaders just about with 20 damage. So that's what we're talking about in terms of how much health they have. draw towards a consuming void, and cast down the Brine Deep. Again, these are the ones that you really all kind of focus on. Get as much stuff gathered up as possible. Be careful with your draw towards a consuming void, because it pulls a whole bunch of stuff in, so you do need to be careful. That could kill you, so you do need to find the right lands to play that card on, so that you don't obviously gather more than 7 things into a certain land. So that one can be a little bit dangerous, but it's something that can deal a lot of damage. Now, there are a bunch here of sort of damage-based cards that actually get weakened against this adversary. We heard a couple of them mentioned already in the episode. I'm just going to point a few out here. These are not, some of these are still okay. Some of them not so much. And some of these are very strong cards, but they do get weakened a lot by the extra health here. So Unleash the Torrents of the Self's Own Essence is I think one of the most underrated cards almost in this game. I think this is borderline S tier, actually, this card. I think it's amazing. But it's pretty significantly weakened here. Tiger's Hunting is a good example as well. Instruments of Their Own Ruin, another highly rated card here that I think does take a big hit. It's probably still fine against England. It's probably still good. If you can threshold that, it's still going to do a huge amount of work for you, but not as much as it would otherwise. Forest of Living Obsidian and Blazing Renewal are the two that got mentioned earlier in the episode, for pretty obvious reasons, I would hope. They deal 2 damage to every invader, generally speaking, albeit with some extra damage if you can hit thresholds and things like that. But definitely takes a big hit against England. And Tsunami is another one that does loads of damage, but in this case might kill like a single town or maybe a single city in if you hit the threshold. So not quite at its absolute best here. Now, Badlands we mentioned earlier on here. I'm not going to mention any Badlands cards in particular here, but if you can pick up Badlands to kind of combo with your big damage stuff, that can also work quite nicely if you have the action economy for it. Now, next up is going to be Skips, and Skips are, and again, a very good. So this is, again, we're still on this very good end of the spectrum here. Skips are excellent into England, and especially multi-skips. So here we've got 5 cards. Sleep and Never Waken, Paralyzing Fright, Solidify Echoes of Majesty's Past, Infestation of Venomous Spiders, and Exaltation of the Incandescent Sky. Now, some of those function a little bit differently than others here. Solidify Echoes and Exaltation of the Incandescent Sky can both deal huge work, but they don't necessarily do multi-skips in the same land. They can skip multiple things across the whole board, which is a little bit different. The Infestation of Venomous Spiders, the Sleep and Never Waken, and in particular the Paralyzing Fright, getting to skip multiple actions in one land is enormous. And, we talked about earlier on how you can end up with like 4 or 5 builds in one single land. If you get to skip all of them, it can be crazy strong. This Paralyzing Fright here is the MVP. It's I think 2 different people mentioned it as part of the comments, and it's obvious why. Hopefully I'll bring it up here on the screen. Skip all invader actions in the turn and generate 8 fear with a very reasonable threshold. Generating loads of fear is obviously insane here, as well as skipping multiple actions. So that is generally one of the MVP cards against the adversary. Exaltation of the Incandescent Sky. I will tell you every time it comes up that it's an S tier major, and probably every time you hear me talk about it, it's going to go higher and higher. I think that might be the 3rd best card in the game, the 3rd best major in the game. That is how highly I rate that card. Now, that's that. Defend and Dahan. Here's one that didn't come up very much in the episode, and something which I rate very highly into this adversary. I still have this on the very good end of the spectrum. Dahan, we know by now, are a highly efficient damage per energy source. The effectiveness of the Defend plus Dahan obviously varies depending on the adversary, and we've talked at length pretty much across all of the adversaries about where this falls on the spectrum. For me, it falls on the very good end of the spectrum. Now, 2 things to note here. One thing, of course, your damage output from Dahan is weakened, like all damage is against England. So that's just, a thing. Your one pattern that comes up a lot is 3 Dahan. Usually 3 Dahan deals 6 damage, right, on a counter attack. Against a lot of adversaries, if you defend the attack, and then when you attack back, 6 damage will kill Explorer, Town, City. right? That's a pretty standard play pattern that comes up a lot. 6 versus 6, and you wipe the land. Not against England. Against England, that will essentially kill the city and the explorer, and the town gets left behind. So there's a big difference there. Huge difference in terms of the output and the efficiency of the Dahan. So a lot of people will probably say this is less effective than normal, and that's a completely understandable approach. However, dealing damage against England is really difficult. So we still want to find ways that we can, if possible, deal damage in an efficient manner, which, as we've already heard, can be very difficult with a lot of the really strong power dealing damage cards in the game. And the other thing I wanted to point out here with England, and so you've kind of, that was your bad end side of the coin, but the good side of the coin against England is you have a bit of time to set up your Dahan movement game. And you'll need it, right? So if you want to go ahead and do the defend and Dahan strategy into England, it can be very strong, but you do need to have strong Dahan movement in your kit here. And trying to find one, maybe draft a single mine or something like that and trying to build a game plan around that. Not really it. What we're looking for here is ideally a unique, an innate, something like that can move the hand around. And if you have that and it's a kind of a core part of your strategy and your kit, then this can become really strong. So I think that's something to bear in mind here. You'll have a bit of time, but just do bear in mind that you're going to want to group your Dahan up. You're going to want to move 2, 3, 4, 5 Dahan together to be able to get work done against England. It's not going to be enough to kind of get little pockets of 2s here and there and hope that's going to get you over the line. It won't. Now, the other thing to bear in mind here with defend and Dahan is if that's your game plan, you are going to probably either need or want to scale into a bunch of majors that play into that plan, and there are many. So let's go through some here. Bargains and power and protection. I talked about it already in my game with Fractured Days, where I almost had a tier level 1 victory. This card is super strong. This card just goes up and up in my estimation over time as well. It's very strong. Very strong against England. If you have ways like River or Fractured or something to move the hand around, this is borderline broken. Trees and Stone speak of war. It's definitely not broken into England, but it's half decent, not too bad. Infinite Vitality, a good one, protects your hand, can get some damage dealt. Trees Radiate, good solid role player, like a very solid role player into England. Yes, your damage is probably only going to kill like a town or something, but deals fear, does defense, stops a build, kind of does pretty much everything you want there. Walter Rock'n'Thorn is a similar one if you get the right terrain types with your jungle or your mountain. I love Walter Rock'n'Thorn. Indomitable Claim, broken. Probably the strongest major in the whole game, and it's certainly one of the strongest things you can do against England at all times. It's absolutely insane, and of course that can scale into the skip all actions in the land. So it might be the single best card against England. It might even be better than Paralyzing Fright. So super strong there. One other card that I put into that category, which actually doesn't belong in the Dahan and defend category, it probably belonged more in the previous category. But Vigor of the Breaking Dawn is another one. If you're doing that whole move Dahan around and stuff like that, it is a card that gets hit. It is one that gets weaker, but it's still something that if that's already your game plan, definitely one to keep an eye out for. Now, Fear, next up. Again, we're still on the very good end of the spectrum here. Over here, very good. Fear is incredible against England. And I don't think I actually had Fear in the very good category against any of the other adversaries so far. I think this is the first time I've put them this high. Fear is just imperative against England for all the reasons we talked about before. But do bear in mind, again, you are mostly going to want to have a high action economy to be able to fit in the minor powers to get you your Fear. It's not going to be enough to pick I was about to say Bringer Dreams and Nightmares because they've low card plays there, but they're not really a particularly great example of a spirit that's struggling to fit Fear into their kit. I think a better example here is probably Shifting Memory. We already used it for a different example. We use them here again. Memory has very few card plays. Finder might be another one here. Finder has very few card plays. It's hard to fit a card like Rain of Blood into a kit when you're only playing 2 cards a turn. Like one of your cards might be a big major and then the other card is like Rain of Blood. You're going to have to do more to the board than that. What we're talking about here is more like Keeper, Stone, and some of those other spirits that have this big, meaty, chunky, sort of major style or late game style, but they can also have enough actions in their kit where they can fit in a Rain of Blood in a reclaim loop or whatever. Or the Importance of Disaster and all that. You can kind of go along and you can pick up a couple of those cards as you go, and you can kind of suck and use your way to making sure you have a fear card ready to go every turn to prevent your high immigration. Now, I've got a couple of majors here. I was just mentioned a couple of minors there, but we do have some majors here. Plague ships sail to distant ports. I think this might be probably the matchup where this might be at its best. Again, we talk about fear being so important with a victory condition for England, but do bear in mind here that this card will not actually resolve you a fear card. So we're talking about the threshold here. Actually, the base effect, adding a bunch of disease on the board, not terrible into England, I would have to say. If you can fit it in your kit, it might be okay. Stop some of those big builds and stop some of the loss conditions. And then later on, get yourself into a loop where you and the rest of your team are going all in and use this to kind of, throw away the last 2, 3, 4 fear cards and push to the fear victory that way. So that could be a way. I don't really like this card very much. Design-wise, it's amazing, but I don't really like the effect. It feels like a very weak card to me. I've never actually cast it, so I could be wrong. Anyway, Terrifying Nightmares, not a great card. You need to be careful where you're pushing stuff here, but it generates quite a bit of fear, and that could be something that you get access to. Sea Monsters, probably a better example of a card that's getting you damage and fear, so that I think is a really good one into England. Twisted Flowers, similarly, if you can fit it in, you can threshold it. Big punch of fear, remove some invaders, not bad. Manifest Incarnation as well, could be. It's not quite the matchup where you get the combo. Some people like to play that card where they put 50 invaders in one land with Finder or something, and then just use that to wipe out half the fear deck. Obviously, you can't do that against England, but it could be something that you might fit at the top of the curve. Maybe play it twice in the game, generate like 10 fear each time or something like that, or 10, maybe 12 fear, and then kind of loop that back and push yourself through a couple of fear cards that way. Now, that's our very goods. Take a breath here before I go on to my goods. 1 second. You may have noticed a very conspicuous lack of something in the very goods. You may be wily, you may be cunning, you may have noticed that I missed something, and we'll get there. Don't worry. Now, that was our very goods. Now we're going goods. Still decent, but it's not quite the priority that some of those other stuff takes. Blight removal. Again, I did not really put blight removal very highly against most of my other adversaries as part of their analysis, and for very good reason. I do not believe blight removal is very strong in this game. And funny, was it today, maybe yesterday, there was a big long discussion in the Discord channel about blight removal, which I'm pretty sure I kicked off because me and my soapbox on high horse about blight removal. In the end, I sort of went through it myself and I put what I thought as the breakdown there, and I figured that blight removal is excellent into Russia, and we will get there next episode. Good into England, decent, not excellent, but decent, and we talked about why earlier on in the episode. We'll go into it in a moment here. Okay into Brandenburg, Prussia, sometimes, not always, but it can be good into BP, and okay into Scotland. Again, sometimes it can be excellent. If it's your inland is your problem, which it often isn't with Scotland, but sometimes it is, it just kind of looping and removing from the inland stuff is not too bad. But if you're taking blight on the coast, they obviously add 2 blight. So anyway, 4 adversaries where it's either okay to good, and there's 4 adversaries where blight removal for me is almost unplayable. Both the Habsburgs, France, and Sweden. I'm not going to go into it now because it's not their episode, but I think half of the adversaries in this game, you just want to leave blight removal at home. Just couldn't be bothered with it. So for that reason, I don't like it. But however, as I said, against England, it's pretty good. As somebody said in the comments earlier on, England don't do anything with blight. They don't add extra blight. They don't add extra ravages. They don't really put any pressure on in the early turn of the game. Their pressure comes from buildings and build actions. So if you can do a blight removal here or there on a key turn, not even on a key turn. Just throw it in. If you've got, again, it's a little bit similar to the fear stuff that I talked about with the action economy. If you've got 2 card plays, you don't want to be dedicated an action to removing a blight. But if you've got 3, 4 plays, throw it in at the end. Get yourself a little blight removal. Throw it in there. Remove a blight from a big land that you know you're not really going to clear. It's not got 6 buildings, so it's not your priority, but it's got maybe 3, maybe 4. I'm not going to be able to defend that if that comes up soon. So I'll just remove the blight from it. If it loops back again, I'll let it ravage one more time before then I go and deal with it and stop it being a lost condition. So for that reason, it can function a lot like a ravage skip, which is pretty decent. I had one card here, which is not a very good card, but I do like this card, and I do like crappy majors, as you probably know by now. It's a fun card to play, and I've certainly cast this in the past and had fun with this card. It's Focus the Land's Anguish. And here clearly this gathers blight, right? It doesn't remove it, but it gathers it. So you can gather blight from a whole bunch of stuff. Again, if you're sort of playing that game where you're really trying to scale to the late game, and the early game I'm just kind of taking a bunch of blight and I don't really care too much about it, I'm more focused on scaling, you might be able to gather 2, 3, 4 blight from around into a land. Again, it's a damage dealing power, so you're not going to go wiping out 5 invaders with this, but you might kill like 3 buildings with this, and if you hit the threshold, of course, here, 2 damage per blight, you probably won't even kill 3 buildings. You might kill 2, but you deal some extra fear and kind of keeps the things ticking over here. So by no means is that an excellent card against England, but it's a fun one and one to maybe keep an eye on. Now, here's the hot take, and here's the one. Here's the one that I was wondering, or you may have been wondering when I was going to put this one in. I'm putting it in neutral, and that is, I've sort of called this tempo. So neutral in the middle here is a tempo or stopping builds. Playing for tempo and playing to stop builds against England. Only neutral? Yes. This is my hot take. Stopping builds against England is not as good as people think it is. Does that mean you never stop builds against England? Categorically, of course not. No. Does that mean you should never isolate against England and take advantage of preventing adjacency builds? No, of course not. All of those things that we talked about before, all of the things that people said about isolate being great and being able to prevent builds, of course, if you get the timing right on them, it feels excellent. Go and watch my playthrough. I'm mentioning it again here. I did hyper pocketing and hyper isolation, and I had the most fun ever, and it was amazing. And I prevented a trillion actions of England. I cleared one full board and I prevented their escalation. I have almost never had as much fun in my life playing Spirit Island, so I am not here to tell you to never do that. What I am here to tell you is you have to be careful, and you have to make stopping the builds of England part of a coherent plan. You've probably heard me sick to death of me hearing about this coherency at this point, but it has to be done as part of an overall strategy. This type of thing is much better on a spirit with native abilities towards that thing. Finder and Stranded Shroud. I did not pick them by accident. That was not a coincidence. They were my team isolate for this very reason. They had isolate in their kit natively. Downpour is another one that I felt I can just see how it works. Go all in, do the hyper pocketing thing, the hyper isolating thing, do as much of it as I can and see if it works. You don't want to just be taking a random schmuck with 2 or 3 card plays and a handful of drafts. I was about to say your Shadows of the world here, but Shadows does actually have a way to gather explorers out of land, so it's probably not the absolute worst candidate to try this kind of strategy on. But just your kind of average schmuck that just kind of gets about and just kind of does some stuff. You don't want to just go and start trying to grab like an isolate card and an explorer push card and this other card and like trying to cobble something together and sort of going all in on this stuff and then realizing like 2 turns later that I stopped like a build or 2, but now my hand is full of explorer push cards and isolate cards and there's stuff everywhere. And I don't have a way to deal with the inevitability that was definitely coming. I was never going to be able to stop all of that. Now they've got 5, buildings in a land. The escalation's coming next turn, and that's going to 6. And then what? Then it's going to 7. You know what I mean? So this is what I talked about earlier. They will punish you for pocketing without an end game in mind. So, you know, this type of play you can pick up with minors here and there, right? And as I said, if you've got native abilities, this will work better than not. But while you're doing it, it needs to be with the more of a mindset of, I'll do it here and there. I'll do it if it fits the moment, when I still have my plan towards that major turn. I've still got my plan of, okay, I'll maybe draft this once. I'll maybe do it once. I'll maybe stop a single build just to keep a tiny bit of pressure off the board. And then I'm going to forget that card, and I'm going to go and hit my major, and then I'm going to hit my windmill slam. And this for me is a different mindset than what I talked about with Habsburg last time out. Against Habsburg, we talked about stop every single build at all cost. Every single town that they add to the board creates a bigger problem for you. Not true against England. Yes, every building does create an additional problem for you. That's still true. But this hyper aggressive prevent builds thing, and take every ravage and don't worry about it and flip the blight card to just stop yourself building, that's not the way to beat England. Oftentimes against England, it is better to let them build and then fight back in the slow or fight back in the ravage. That is my hot take against England. And I would say the vast majority of games I've played against England have been just let them build. Don't bother. Don't fight them on that axis. They have rules that really prevent you from preventing them. So don't try. Just let it happen. Dig for your majors, scale your spirit, and go and beat them after the plastic gets added to the board. That's the hot take. We're nearly there. Bad this time. So we're now on this side of things. Consolidation of invaders. For obvious reasons. You can't consolidate invaders. We talked about draw towards a consuming void being a risk already. Another couple here. Weave together the fabric of place. Not very good against England. And obviously irresistible call for obvious reasons. Gathering, what is it, 5 towns is a pretty risky prospect. Of course, you can then skip actions and isolate the land and all that. It won't never ever come up. But for the most part, that's one you probably want to be leaving at home. And then finally here, we're now on the we're on this side of the spectrum. The other side off the screen here, your very bads here are your small and medium damage cards. Couple here that are pretty laughably bad. Smothering Infestation, 1 damage to each invader plus an additional 3 damage. It's just not getting any work done at all. It'll give you a disease. It'll give you a bit of fear. The odd time it might come up, but that's not a card you really want to be investing in. Storm Swat, Mist of Oblivion is an even worse thing than Smothering Infestation. I drew it in the game that I played, and I was like, oh, this is just awful. Strangling Firevine. Another couple of examples there of cards that do little bits and pieces, and kill some explorers and maybe kill a building. It's just not going to do it for you, so don't bother with any of that. Oh, now that is worthy of stopping for a moment of breathing before I pass out. We don't have any spirits because you wonderful people in the community already covered it. You picked up on all of them. One that never came up is Breath of Darkness, and I was surprised Gooseman as a gamer never mentioned Breath of Darkness, because I think Breath of Darkness is excellent into England. It is one of those spirits that can do hyper pocketing, but with care. It deals a ton of energy, or not a ton of energy, it deals a ton of fear. It doesn't deal a ton of energy. Don't play Breath with a top track focus. Go on your bottom track, get loads of card plays, generate loads of fear, and you should beat them pretty handy. Now, the giveaway. It's finally time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for waiting. Some of you, thank you for fast forwarding and finding this. It is, of course, time to do the giveaway. I did mention again, one final time. Here's the box. It looks terribly boring because it's just a white box, but it does have a tube in it. And inside the tube, you've got one of these things that I have over my shoulder. No, you do not have a wooden frame inside this tube, inside this box, because it is only the print, not the wooden frame. But do not be dismayed, because the print is absolutely wonderful. I talked about it already. I'm not going to waste time after 2 hours and 52 minutes waxing lyrical about that, but I will wax lyrical about the wonderful Nolan Nasser one final time here. This dude is just he's just unbelievable. I cannot thank him enough for making this happen for me. He contacted me today, and I was chatting with him a little bit in the chat about this giveaway, and he told me about a kind of a story, a personal story, which of course I'm not going to get into now, but I was blown away about by him and just the story and everything, and this dude, I just cannot tell you what a cool guy this is. Like, he had absolutely no reason to contact me and give me $300 worth of things for me other than just being a nice guy. I just that is baffling to me. Nolan, again, mate, I can't thank you enough. If you're listening to this, blown away is the only way I can describe it. So let's do it, guys. Let's get somebody one of these things that I am so blown away by, because you will be blown away when you see it. They are incredible. Now, what am I doing here? What do I have to do? I have to fiddle around with some screens here and make sure I'm doing this the right way. So I have some other windows that I'm going to go to now momentarily. So I'm going to bring them up. It's going to be that one, and it's going to be this one over here. So let me just kind of set this up because I'm going to have to change my screen. I don't want to be sharing the wrong screens and all that kind of stuff. So I'm still looking at you on this screen. This screen is where the giveaway is going to be. So I'm going to do one thing now. I am going to change over, and we're going to have a look at a different screen. So hopefully this does this all nice and neatly and cleanly. So let's go to this screen. There it is. This is 129 names. Everybody who was able to enter the competition and follow all the rules and do all of that kind of good stuff. So a massive thank you to all of you for getting involved here. I'm just scrolling up and down real quick that you can see all the names in there. This is all public information. I'm not disclosing anything that isn't in the chat or the comments pane of the giveaway here. So this is everybody who obviously did the follow, subscribe, comment, contact me by DM on the other platforms and all that kind of stuff. So I have spoken to all of you by DM. You're all in. There are, as I say, 129 of you here. So I have everything lined up, and I'm going to do the old right click copy so that you can actually see me doing this without keyboard shortcuts here. So this is the boomer version of copy and paste. So there we are. That's copying all 129 of them. The next thing I am going to do is I'm going to go over to one of my favorite websites in the world, which is wheelofnames.com. And if you've never used this, you can thank me later, because you will surely have a way to take advantage of this multiple times for the rest of your life. I love this. I use it in work. I use it in all sorts of things. My wife has a business, and we use this for doing giveaways there, and it's super cool. So let's come over and let's do our same right click and paste. And there are our list of 129 names that are now gone in there, top to bottom. There they are. That is you listening. You're probably in this. I hope you're in this. And I'm going to hit this button now, and I'm going to spin, and whichever name pops out is going to be the winner. I will, of course, contact you after the episode goes live. I won't do it during the week just because, I'll leave it until after the episode goes live. And this episode will, of course, go live on this coming Sunday, as it always does. That is going to be 26th of May, 7:30 p.m. local time for me. So after that goes up, I will contact you to let you know. I just want to preserve a little bit just in case I tell them that they go off and they spoil it for everybody else. I want to give everybody the little bit of excitement that hopefully you, if you're listening, have while you're listening to this. So let's go ahead and spin it. Best of luck, everybody. Huge best of luck to everyone. And let's see. Let's go ahead and spin. Here we go. Here's it going to be. Spin, 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 spin. Who do we got? Who do we got? Who do we got? Velocity Raptor 77. We have a winner. Hopefully that's clear enough on the screen there. Massive congratulations to you, Velocity. Huge congratulations. I'm super chuffed for you. As I say, I'll be in touch, and yes, I will cover the cost of shipping to get that to you wherever you are in the world. So that is going to be all of that. Let me come back here and hit my button that hopefully brings me back on the screen. Here I am. And I did do that in real time. Hopefully everybody is thoroughly satisfied with that. And I did it at 2 hours and whatever, 57 minutes into my video. So I trust that you believe that I would not be re-recording 3 hours of content to spin that if I didn't want to be happy with the outcome of the thing. So there, of course, was no rigging involved. They were a set of clear criteria. All you had to do was comment. There was no checking of what people said or where you were from or any such other nonsense as part of any of that. So that is going to be all of that. Let me bring this back over here. I have you over there, and then I've got my actual screen with my notes and such over here. Yeah, we're almost 3 hours in. I did do a playthrough. I've already talked loads about it, so I'm not really going to spend any kind of time here really looking at or kind of talking through the details. It was an amazing playthrough. Again, hopefully you've heard enough from me to maybe convince you to go and check it out. All sorts of hyper pocketing, hyper prevention. I shut down, it must have been like 60% of the actions of the adversary for the whole game. It was really unbelievable. You know, there was one turn, for example, and somebody mentioned it earlier in the episode, where it's great if you get to isolate a land and prevent a double high immigration. There was a turn in this game where I prevented all 4 lands from double high immigration building, and it was the sweetest feeling in the entire world. It was jungles, and I had 4 empty jungles, and 2 of them I think had nothing on one side of the board, and the other 2 were isolated, and I did nothing from a double high immigration. It was fantastic. So super cool. I of course pushed a whole bunch of stuff around, and like I said, I had an end game in mind. So in this case here, the end game was very much around finding some big hitter majors, which is a bit of a risk. If I missed, I could have lost this game, despite preventing so many things happening. But Finder did go ahead and find volcanic eruption, which I think I mentioned already, and they got to do that twice to blow up essentially the 2 biggest lands on the board. It was a pretty standard Finder build here. It was a kind of a top, middle, bottom kind of build, which generates a whole bunch of energy and lets you kind of pivot into majors late in the game. So that was a lot of fun. Finder just got to do a million Finder things, and I just love Finder so much. And it was so much fun to just move stuff around and prevent things and group things up and just Tai Chi master stuff. It's so much fun. So that was cool. Shroud got to do some cool things too. So it was a hybrid build with Shroud. I like to go to 2 energy with Shroud. Again, I don't really know what the quote unquote standard build is with Shroud, but I do tend to like 2 energy a lot, and then kind of rush bottom. So I G2 quite a bit with Shroud of Silent Mist. The isolate was key, of course, from the stranded. Big part of this whole game. I mostly killed explorers with the damage pings. I didn't really get the fear farms going too early in the game. I was more focused on shutting down the builds. So that was a big part of how that played out there. And then similar to how one of my games went, I think it was all the way back at Sweden, maybe in the very first of the Adversary episodes, I found Sky Stretches to shore, which again is one of my favorite miners in the deck. I found it on a pretty early turn with Shroud, and again, I said it, I'm like, this is gonna come up. This is gonna be big. So I took it, and I did another really good option. I think I had Gifted Twin Days as another option in that draft there, but I knew this is gonna be big. And of course, Finder or Shroud themselves, you know, is very slow. A lot of slow powers there. But I knew late in that game with Finder, there will be turns when I'm going to be digging big major searching, and the Sky Stretches can matter. And of course, here Sky Stretches and Volcanic Eruption was basically the whole game. I did finally clear up the final turn with Exaltation of the Incandescent Sky. Again, I've already talked about how powerful that card is, and it did some pretty amazing work on that final turn too. So there were some cheats involved. Unfortunately, every single time there's always some sort of cheating and mistakes that I make, and this game was no different, but I'm not going to labor that point here. I talk about it in the video, so I won't waste your time talking about it here. It's unfortunate. I am doing my very, very best to make sure that none of those things happen. And in this particular case, where there was a kind of a phantom town that would have sort of all had all the house of cards kind of collapsing, I've looked back and there were about 20 different actions I could have taken that all sort of fixed it, but there was no way I was going to be able to explain that on the video, and I certainly will not be explaining it to bore you with the details now. But anyway, that was all of that. Very final note here: Shroud did get to play a major. They got to play Cleansing Floods and hit the quad water, which was the first time I believe I've ever resolved Cleansing Floods in almost 200 games of Spirit Island, and it was a very fun time. And I was very happy that I got to put another crappy major and let it show it do some pretty good work here, which is one of my favorite things to do on my channel. Now, that is all of that. Woo! 3 hours, 2 minutes. It should be no surprise. England, they go to the late game, and this episode has gone to the late game. That's okay. I hope it's okay for you. I've enjoyed myself. I hope you've enjoyed yourself too. We're almost done. Of course, I'm going to talk about what's next. That's the last little segment here. Going to be nice and quick, hopefully. This is basically just talking about what's coming up next. Of course, that's 7 out of 8 done. So we've one adversary left for the Adversary Series. That is going to be Russia. As far as I'm concerned, when we talk again about this relative scoring here, I have Russia at the max at a full difficulty 11. Slightly more than England, 10.75 versus 11. Very, very close, but I do think Russia are distinctly the most difficult adversary. For many reasons, which we will get to, of course, as part of our podcast episode. But before then, we have a playthrough, as we always do. And if you're new to here, you won't be familiar with what we're doing here. For everybody else, you know the score. We've got 3 options. I'm going to do the playthrough. It's going to be the next episode that comes up, and you get to choose who I'm playing into Russia. So as always, I've got my kind of easy, hard, and wildcard matchup, which is usually somewhere between the two. And for those of you not sort of familiar with the process here, we're looking for an easy matchup. It's not a no-brainer. It's not a I can't possibly lose type of matchup. It's a decent, maybe an A, not an S, maybe an A, that type of thing. Our hard matchup here again is not going to be like an F, like unwinnable type of matchup. It's going to be a tough. It'll usually be about around maybe a C, maybe a B, that type of thing. And then finally, then your wild card matchups is usually going to be somewhere sort of in the middle. And some sort of wild cardy, oddbally. That was what the team isolate was against England. I wasn't really sure, is it good, is it bad? Let's find out type of thing. So anyway, that's the explanation. Here's the actual 3 options. So up first, we're going to have our easy team, and this is going to be Team Beast. So Russia, of course, play with Beast, and that's all of that. So we'll see how that plays out if they get chosen. But the team itself is going to be Many Minds, Move as One, and Sharp Fangs Behind the Leaves with the encircle aspect. That's the team. Now, Many Minds Move as One. I always talk here about how kind of Red Revenge's sort of Spirit Axis kind of chart that he did a year or so ago. I like to use that to kind of guide what the matchups look like here. Many Minds he has rated as an A plus, I think, and he's got Fangs Encircle as an A. Now, Fangs itself, regular Fangs and the unconstrained Fangs are both, I think, a B. So, Encircle being a little bit better than them as an A here. It should be a decent matchup, but a fun one. Lots of beasts. You're never going to lose to the lost condition, but there's a lot of play. And the encircle aspect in particular, I think, is super interesting and cool and a different take on how Fangs plays here. So I think there could be some really fun, a lot of fun in that one. A lot of moving parts. And actually, interestingly enough, I've heard more than one person, I've heard multiple people. I think Arya Fireheart on the Spirit of Discussion channel was talking about this. Fangs and Many Minds isn't actually a particularly strong combo. I've done it myself. I've done them myself at least once, maybe twice, maybe 3 times. And I had quite a lot of fun with it, but it's not a no-brainer combo like it might seem. Because they're fighting over the same resource. So there's this kind of push and pull type of affair going on here where I want to pull your beasts away, you want to pull mine away. How do we share them? How can we maybe use them in one land and then use them and donate them to another land? And there is a bit of a almost like Lure and Ocean, where one's inland, one's coastal. It seems like they'll work together, but actually their effects and their abilities are kind of in conflict. So it's a little bit similar, I think, here with Many Minds and Fangs. So maybe some interesting play dynamics there. That is your easy option. Now, your hard option is going to be Team D optimized, which is going to be Hearth Vigil and Keeper of the Forbidden Wilds with the hostility aspect. So, what is Team D optimized? Here is 2 spirits, which are very, very, highly revered, highly sort of rated and ranked among the spirits in the game. Hearth Vigil for me, very much pushing top 5 spirits in the game. And Keeper is not that high, but it's probably top 10, I would say. It's certainly pushing for it. But Keeper is going to have the hostility aspect first of all, which is going to hurt it quite a bit. Because I believe Keeper at its base is very strong. I think Keeper at its base is an S tier matchup into Russia. But hostility, Red has rated as a B. And Hearth Vigil, which is S matchup into almost every adversary, this is by far its worst matchup according to Red, and it's a B matchup there as well. So I thought this is quite interesting. 2 spirits, very, very strong, usually very, much about stats and high card plays and lots of actions on the board and really, really sort of impactful actions. Here, very much not optimized towards the adversary. So interesting to see how those 2 might struggle with what's going on with Russia there. So that's certainly potentially a very interesting one as well. A little bit of dynamics going on as well with Keeper kind of with their sort of special rule pushing the hand. That could come up in the game as well, but they also do destroy some of the hand. So there's definitely a bit of a push and pull there too. Now, that's your hard matchup. Finally, your wild card matchup is going to be Team Low Plus, which is going to be Lightning Swift Strike with the sparking aspect and Shadows Flicker Like Flame with the Dark Fire aspect. And this is Team Low Plus, of course, because they were the base game low spirits, but they have the plus increase on difficulty from 2 aspects here. And of course, both of those aspects did in fact come from Nature Incarnate, and they're both spectacular. So first of all, love Sparking Lightning. God, I love Sparking Lightning so much. Don't really like Lightning and any of its other variants. I think Immense can be a bit of fun or whatever, but not a huge fan of the others. But Sparking is quality. I love Sparking. It, of course, does have this 1 ping to everything ability, but it takes a lot to get that going. So, if you had that in turn 1 or turn 2, the game would be a cakewalk, but you don't. It takes a while for you to get that. So, Red has Sparking rated as an A. Which I'm slightly surprised by. You do have the other card. I can't remember what it's called. That the other card that you get as part of the aspect that deals 1 damage and adds a battle. So again, maybe that's kind of part of using that to kind of move and quote unquote kill explorers. But yeah, we'll see. Shadows Darkfire, he rates it as a C. Again, a little bit surprised by that. I would have maybe found that was more of a B than a C because, of course, it can kind of deal with explorers a little bit, as I talked about before. So for me, that's an A and a C, maybe a little bit more like a B and a B. Interesting. Of course, the 2 base lows. I have had Shadows on the channel before, but it was a bit of a tragedy and it was a loss all the way back in my first playthrough. So this is a chance to get Shadows a little bit of retribution and revenge as far as that is concerned. This is also consequently, because it's the last episode, because I, of course, planned it that way. It is the last sort of set of spirits that has given every single spirit a chance. So I have given you, the viewer, the listener, my dear listeners, you have had a chance to get every single spirit on this channel. So they've all 37 of them have been involved in the options up until now, of course, with various variants, and I haven't covered every single aspect, naturally, because there weren't nearly that many options, but every single spirit was counted for in there. So I've had about, what are we now? I think I've had about 20-ish. I've done about 10 playthroughs, I think. So I think I've had about 20 spirits on the channel. Of course, there were the 2 apocryphal spirits as well there. So I'm around about halfway, I think, as far as the overall roster. And this would get 2 more, of course, on there. So I like playing with every spirit. I've talked about that before, and I'm not gonna get into it now. But it's very much in my wheelhouse to kind of show everything and try everything and get a whole variety of play experience. And hopefully that's something that you enjoy, and hopefully getting a chance to pick those is also something that you enjoy. But that is going to be it. We're 3 minutes 11 in. We're, what are we now? It's 12 minutes to 1 in the morning. Unfortunately, these things just seem to keep going long and long. But anyway, as I say, hopefully it was of value. Hopefully you enjoyed yourself. If you did, please do, of course, get involved in the comments, hit the like, hit the subscribe, or, as I said before, not necessarily just hit the subscribe, but don't hit unsubscribe this time around. It would be great to see you stick around, and hopefully you found a new channel that you enjoy. But like I said, if any of the rest of you are gone, well, that's quite okay. I certainly will not hold it against you. But do also as well let me know in the comments anything you'd like to tell me about Russia, maybe any of those matchups I just mentioned there, or any of those spirits that might be particularly interesting. Do you agree with me? Are Russia the hardest adversary in the game? So hit me up in the comments there, and you will, of course, get your comments on the next episode, and we will deep dive into all of that. But until now, or until then, not until now, until then, that is going to be it. And really appreciate you being here. Until next time, may your manifestations be always powerful and glorious. See you then.